The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. Out on that stretch of forgotten land, a lone figure stood, silhouetted against a fading sunset. He adjusted his hat, the brim dipping down to shield his eyes from the encroaching darkness. It was then he heard her voice, a soft, trembling cry that cut through the silence like a knife. "Tie me to the fence again, Dad." A youthful plea, desperate and raw. It ignited something deep within him. A cowboy named Luke, hardened by years of work under the open sky, felt the weight of her words resonate in his chest. He wasn't a stranger to hardship. He'd spent countless nights under the stars, contemplating life's misfortunes, but this was different. This was a call for help. Luke's heart raced as he approached the dilapidated homestead, a ranch that had seen better days. The paint chipped off the boards like peeling memories, each fleck a testament to neglect. The old wooden fence must have been sturdy once, but time had not been kind. He made his way cautiously, feeling the crunch of gravel beneath his boots. As he got closer, he spotted her, an 18-year-old girl named Clara. She was bound tightly to the splintered fence post, her wrists raw from struggling against the coarse rope. Her vibrant red hair glimmered like fire against the fading day, stark against the dullness of her surroundings. Tears streamed down her face, glistening in the dying light. That moment Luke knew he could turn back. He could ride away, leaving the past in the dust. But the gravity of her fear pulled him closer. He took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage he had. "Hey," he called, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Clara looked up, her eyes as wide as saucers. "Please, you have to help me. My father, he's drunk again." Luke's jaw clenched. The thought of any man, let alone a father, treating his own flesh and blood like this was infuriating. He stepped forward, eyeing the rope binding Clara. This wasn't just a physical restraint. It was a manifestation of her father's control, a shadow looming over her spirit. "Let's get you out of here," he said, kneeling before her. The rope was frayed but knotting tighter than a secret kept too long. He pulled at it, his fingers working deftly, each tug a battle against her pain. Clara winced. "Please be careful." Her plea pierced through him. Every bruise, every scar she bore now became part of his mission. Luke took a moment to meet her gaze, full of warmth and empathy, grounding her amidst the chaos. "You're strong, Clara." With every twist and turn of the knot, he could sense the urgency. Time was dwindling. The sun was slipping away, and the day would soon cloak the reality of her situation in darkness. Each moment felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of unshed tears pressed down on his shoulders. Finally, the rope fell away, and Clara pulled away from the post, her arms struggling to feel free again. Rubbing her wrists, she gasped with relief mixed with disbelief. I can't believe it." Luke nodded, the warmth of her gratitude radiating in the chill that settled around them. But they had little time to savor this victory. From the porch came a sudden shout, a slurred voice breaking the peace. "Clara!" The drunken growl echoed across the yard, more animal than man. Luke's heart sank. This was not a man who played by the rules. He could already picture the scene, the rage, the hurt, the reclamation of power. "We've got to go." Clara's eyes widened with fear, and Luke grasped her arm gently, ushering her away from the fence. They moved quickly towards the shadows of the trees, the safety of the earth brimming with secrets. But with every hurried step, the sound of heavy boots thudding down the porch echoed closer, relentless and ominous. Just as they reached the tree line, Clara paused. "I can't leave him, he's..." Luke turned, his expression stern yet soft, urging her to see. "Clara, sometimes family is just blood. You deserve to be free." More shouting rang out behind them, angry, frustrated, and increasingly unhinged. Luke could almost taste the alcohol-soaked rage from the old man, a tempest brewing on the horizon. Clara gasped, her voice trembling. "He's always like this, but he's still my dad." Luke took a moment, wrestling with the fight within him. On one hand, compassion and empathy for a girl who had endured enough. On the other, recognition of a cycle of cruelty and abuse that had to end. He pressed, his voice calm yet insistent. "You're not responsible for him." Tension hung in the air, thick as the impending storm. Clara's eyes shifted, searching for answers in Luke's steady gaze. He won't hurt himself," she whispered. "Mad," Luke echoed, anger bubbling beneath his surface. "Mad people do mad things." He shook his head. Another shout rang out. The old man's voice was a sickening cocktail of fury and despair. How could a parent twist the love meant for a child into something so toxic? Please, Clara's voice broke. Then let's make sure you're okay first, Luke urged, gripping her shoulder. Once you're safe, you can think of him. Clara's breathing quickened, almost like her mind fought against the gravity of his words. But amidst the conflict, something sparked within her, the flicker of determination. She nodded, and they bolted deeper into the thicket, moving silently, shadows dancing as they fled. Each step felt electrifying, as if they were caught in a wild chase. Luke could feel Clara beside him, her spirit, though bruised, stubbornly pulsed with life. They pressed on, breathing in sync, the world around them a blur. But nothing prepared them for what came next. A loud crash ripped through the night as the front door of the farmhouse slammed open, followed by a thunderous shout. "Clara, you coward!" Panic surged through Clara's body, and Luke grabbed her hand tighter. Cowboys were often portrayed as solitary figures of bravery, but this felt bigger than him. He urged. Luke kept his eyes on the trail, but he could hear her father stumbling after them, heavy boots artistically defying gravity as they echoed around. The night sky was dark now, but the moon hung high, illuminating the path ahead. It guided them forward, a light breaking through the shadows of despair. When they reached the edge of the trees, the open field stretched before them. The weight of freedom was within reach, yet fear coiled around Clara like a serpent, holding her close to the grip of her past. The shout was now an anguished wail reverberating through the night. Tears brimmed Clara's eyes. What if he gets lost? What if he won't get lost, but you will if you go back, Luke interrupted. Trust me. As if the universe placed its final bet on them, Clara took a deep breath, the strength blossoming within her heart. She squeezed Luke's hand, a silent agreement, an unspoken promise to take the leap. Together they darted across the field, each stride uniting their will against the chaos left behind. The farmers' shouts faded into the distance, like echoes of a nightmare fleeing into the night. Finally, they reached the barn-weathered wood, faded paint but steadfast. It had always been a sanctuary for cows and hay, men and machines, but tonight it was their safe haven. As they slipped inside, Clara collapsed against a wall, breathing heavily, her body shaking. I can't go back. Luke knelt beside her, gentle but firm. Clara, listen, you're not abandoning him. To find yourself isn't to find his ruin. She looked up at him, confusion and determination etched in her features. It's not that easy, Maybe you just need to let him know you are stronger than he thought, Luke replied. When the sun rises again, we can think through everything. It took a moment for Clara to gather her breath, the weight of the night unshackling piece by piece. As silence enveloped them, Luke watched as she found her own strength, a girl who had fought her battles, now forming her own destiny. The night was thick and heavy, yet a sense of serenity seeped into the barn. Outside, a chorus of crickets serenaded the stars, each note a reminder of life beating on, insisting with vibrant energy. In that little barn, amidst the fading daylight, Clara and Luke joined in an unlikely alliance, a bond formed under the harshest of circumstances, illuminating the way forward through the darkness that lives within every tortured heart. With the promise of dawn ahead, the world outside felt a little less daunting. Despite all they had endured, two spirits would rise with the sun, determined to claim their lives, their stories unbound by the restrictions of the past. The hot summer sun hung low in the sky, turning the day into shades of gold and orange, like a painting of a world that seemed too peaceful to harbor darkness. Not far from the old ranch, the air was thick with the scent of dust and hay, a smell familiar to cowboy Luke Baker. He rode through the sunlit fields, the rhythmic clop of his horse echoing against the silence that surrounded him. He was a man shaped by the rugged terrain of the West, weathered, strong, and fiercely independent. But then he heard it, a muffled sound barely rising above the wind's whispers, a scream desperate and pained. Luke pulled gently at the reins, bringing his horse to a halt. He muttered, his instincts peaking with concern. The scream pierced through the stillness, wrapping around him like a cold embrace. He turned his horse toward the source. As he approached the dilapidated farmhouse, something caught his eye, a girl tied to a fence post, struggling against her bonds. Fear coursed through her veins, reflected in her wide, tear-filled eyes. "Stop it." Her voice trembled, desperate yet brave, scattering against the wooden slats of the fence. Luke felt his heart race. What was happening here? He dismounted quickly, the thud of his boots against the ground soft yet firm. As he crept closer, her face became clearer in the fading light. She couldn't be more than 18. The ropes bruised her wrists, evidence of a battle against restraint that felt all too real. Hey, it's all right," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. He knelt in front of her. Clara looked at him, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. "You have to get me out of here, my father. He's drunk again." Luke felt a fire building inside him. Girl's father, her protector, had turned into something that made her feel like a captive in her own home. The sight sparked a deeper rage, his cowboy instincts igniting as he picked at the knots. He thought. "Hold still," he said, working swiftly at the ropes, his fingers nimble from years of handling reins and tools. Clara winced as he tugged, the fibers biting into her skin. "Please don't hurt me," she whispered, vulnerability etched into every word. He paused for a second, meeting her gaze. With a final pull, the rope gave way, slipping off her wrists. Clara gasped, rubbing the raw skin as the realization washed over her. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she was free. But freedom had its price. The sound of shuffling feet and angry shouts broke through the tranquility. Clara's father emerged from the shadows of the house, his figure swaying, eyes wild and furious. "Clara!" His voice boomed, a mix of rage and alcohol-fueled madness. Luke's heart raced, adrenaline surging as he stood protectively in front of Clara. "We have to go." "Are you insane?" she cried, fear gripping her heart once more. Luke didn't flinch. "He doesn't want you gone, he wants to control you." The urgency in his voice was a firm anchor amidst the chaos swirling. Clara hesitated, torn between the father who had wounded her and the cowboy who offered her a sliver of hope. Luke saw the struggle flash across her eyes and stepped closer, the determination in his stance unwavering. "You deserve more than this." That seemed to ignite something within her, a flicker of strength that had been snuffed out for far too long. The moment stretched, fragile yet powerful, before she finally nodded, the fight within her igniting to life. Together, they sprinted into the grove of trees just behind the fence, the sounds of shouting growing fainter with each step. As they crossed into the tree line, Clara turned back, pain etching her features for her father. "I should have been better." Luke grasped her shoulders gently, forcing her to focus on him. "This isn't on you, Clara." In that moment, as he held her gaze, the gravity of her situation swirled around them. The love between a father and daughter is meant to nourish, to uplift. But this was a masquerade of containment, darkness cloaking the essence of love into something insidious. But the stillness in the trees was a fleeting illusion. The old man's voice thundered from the house, his hate-filled shouts crawling into the night air like a specter. "Clara!" Luke felt a shiver run down his spine. "We have to keep moving." As they slipped deeper into the woods, Clara fought back tears, each one a testament to her lost innocence. "I don't know how it got this bad," she said, her voice cracking. "Sometimes our love can blind us," Luke replied, guiding her through the underbrush. "It's hard to see how someone can poison the very thing they claim to cherish." Their footsteps were muffled by the damp earth, but the urge to flee quickened their pace. Clara's heart thudded in her chest. Behind them, the world was a cacophony of chaos, the old man's shrieks mingling with the chirps of crickets, nature violently contrasting against the thrall of anger. They broke through the trees into a clearing that opened toward the distant mountains. The moon bathed the area in silver light, and for a moment, Clara felt a semblance of freedom. She turned to Luke, breathless, her heart pounding in her chest. She asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Luke scanned the area, his instincts honed like a predator tracking its prey. "We head toward town, get far away from him." Clara felt torn. Luke took a step closer, determination etched into every line of his face. "You're stronger than you realize. The moment you decided to fight for your life, that's the moment you claimed your strength." The words sank deep. Clara felt them wrap around her heart like a lifeline. With a swift nod, she steeled herself, and they set off into the night, hearts racing but spirits ignited. Each step forward was a declaration of independence, a testament to the pain she had endured. But even amidst the hope that blossomed with every step, A sense of foreboding hung thick in the air. The shadow of her father loomed heavy, a specter trailing behind her, threatening to catch up with the nightmare she had escaped. As they approached town, the quiet streets lay before them, illuminated by the flickering light of street lamps. It felt almost surreal, like a juxtaposition of worlds. The bustle of life continued on while Clara had nearly drowned in her own. She asked, glancing nervously around. "We find the sheriff," Luke replied, his tone sure and unwavering. But when they arrived at the small, wooden building, the anxiety twisted in Clara's stomach. She hesitated at the door. "What if he doesn't believe me?" "Let me handle that part," Luke reassured her. "No one should fear their own father, Clara." With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, the scent of wood and dust enveloping them. A man stood behind the counter, flipping through paperwork. His eyes lifted, surprised to see visitors this late. He asked, his tone friendly yet cautious. Luke stepped forward, his voice steady like rolling thunder. "We need to speak with the sheriff." The man raised an eyebrow but nodded. "He's on duty." Inside the sheriff's office, Clara could feel her heart race, each beat echoing against the weight of her truth. The walls were a palette of muted colors, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside her, but the time had come. The sheriff emerged, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that spoke of wisdom and experience. He asked, concern etched in his brow. Before Clara could speak, Luke took a step forward, the protector coming out in him. "This young lady needs help. Her father is drunk and abusive." The sheriff's demeanor changed, the sternness in his eyes softening with concern. He asked Clara gently. She felt those lingering fears bubble to the surface, but the comfort in Luke's presence propelled her forward. "Yes," she said, voice strong despite the weight in her chest. "He's hurt me." "All right," the sheriff said, his voice firm yet kind. "We'll take care of this." But before relief could wash over her, panic struck again. "We'll protect you," the sheriff assured her. As the weight of fear began to lift, Clara finally let out a shaky breath, feeling the heaviness of her truth slowly release. She stood there, resolute as Luke remained by her side, a steady presence amidst the chaos. In that moment, she felt alive. The shadows of her father faded away, now little more than a memory cloaked in darkness. And she realized freedom is not merely escaping the dark, it's also embracing the light that comes with starting anew. In the days that followed, Clara found her footing, with the sheriff and his team ensuring her father wouldn't drag her back into his world of control. She began to see glimpses of her own strength, starting to reclaim her life one day at a time. And in the end, it was a cowboy compassionate and brave, who had helped her find the courage to untangle the ropes that once bound her spirit. Luke Baker became her ally, her guiding light in the darkest of times. Through every challenge, she held tight to the idea that love does exist within the depths of fear, and fear can never truly extinguish the resilience of the human spirit. She was not a victim of her story. She was the author, and the next chapter would be her own. The sun hung low, casting a fiery glow over the vast open plains. The heat of the day surged up from the ground like waves stirring in a restless sea. A lone figure cut through the golden grasses, a cowboy named Luke Baker. He was no stranger to hard work, each line on his face carved by the sun and tempered by years of riding the range. But today, an uneasiness gnawed at him, like a storm brewing just out of sight. As he rode, he caught a sound, a muffled cry, barely perceptible over the rustling of the wind. It tugged at his heart, sharp and immediate. Sitting tall in his saddle, he strained to listen. The voice was shaky, flailing in the air like a bird caught in a trap. Luke's instincts kicked into high gear. He urged his horse forward fast. As they approached a dilapidated fence line, the sight that met his eyes made his blood run cold. An 18-year-old girl, wild and fierce, struggled against the ropes binding her to a weathered post. Anguish twisted her features like a wicked knot. "Stop!" she cried, a plea invoking pain and desperation. Luke felt something deep within him shift. It didn't matter who the girl was or how she got there. All that mattered was that she needed help, and he was the only one around. Dismounting quickly, he wiped the sweat from his brow, the reality of her situation hitting him like an unexpected wave. "Hey." "It's all right," he said calmly, kneeling before her, his eyes searching hers for any flicker of hope. "I'm here to help you." Clara, she breathed, voice trembling as dread flashed across her eyes. My father, Luke's heart sank. How could a father betray the very essence of love like this? Don't worry, Clara. I'm gonna get you out of here, he promised, the weight of her pain pressing down on his words as he studied the knot tightly wound around her wrists. The rope felt coarse, old, and unforgiving. As he worked away at the restraints, the weight of her fear began to ease, but there was an urgency that thickened the air. Please hurry, Clara whispered, glancing nervously toward the house. He'll come back. Just then, a loud shout erupted from inside a drunken bellow that made the ground shake. Clara. The anger and chaos in his voice were like a flash flood, threatening to wash away any escape. Clara trembled, her face pale. No, he won't, Luke said firmly, his hand still working the knot. I promise you he can't take away your freedom. Shouting erupted again, sounding closer, filled with venomous rage. Clara, where are you? The final knot slipped free, and the rope fell away like a shackle of despair lifting from her spirit. Clara rubbed her wrists, tears filling her eyes as Luke rose to his feet. Now we run. Follow me, he urged, taking her hand. As their fingers entwined, Clara felt warmth in the connection, a bond stronger than the constraints that had held her. Together, they dashed toward the trees lining the yard, fear coursing through Clara's veins. But Luke's grip was firm, reassuring. Each step placed between them was a step toward freedom, away from the dark shadow of her father. But just as they reached the edge of the woods, they heard a crash, a sudden violent sound that sliced through the night. Clara froze, terror coursing through her. Luke shouted, pulling her into the cover of the trees, heart pounding against his chest. He could feel Clara trembling beside him, the weight of her father's wrath now haunting the air around them. You don't understand, Clara whispered, her voice a mix of fear and defiance. My father needs me, Luke shook his head, holding her shoulders firmly. Sometimes our family doesn't know how to love. You can't let his darkness consume your light. The night was silent except for Clara's shaky breaths. Each one echoed her internal struggle between family loyalty and the need for self-preservation. Just behind the thick trunk of a tree, Luke felt the rough bark pressing against his back, a reminder of how alive they were, how they had escaped for now. But the silence shattered again as her father's voice bellowed, slurring words filled with rage and confusion. Clara, we have to move, Luke said, urging her into motion once more. You can't go back to him. An agonizing look crossed Clara's face as they slipped deeper into the woods. I don't know how to live without him. Not like this, Luke replied, his voice filled with conviction. You are stronger than you think, Clara. With every step they took, the darkness of the woods started to feel less like an abyss and more like a path into the unknown. The shadows danced around them, but they were not alone. They had each other. Luke turned to her, a glint in his eyes. We need a plan. The word hung on her lips, a tinged mixture of hope and fear. He won't, Luke shot back, his confidence unwavering. The town is filled with folks who care. Through the dense trees, they slipped into the clearing, the bright moon casting silver light across untamed grass. Clara squinted, letting the expansive world wash over her, a deep breath filling her lungs as if she were inhaling the promise of new beginnings. This is it, she whispered. Yeah, Luke smiled gently. But as they approached the edge of the woods, the tractor-like figure of Clara's father stumbled into view, his red face twisted in fury, eyes bloodshot and wild. Clara. The sound of his voice sent a shiver down Clara's spine as the weight of his utter rage hung thick in the humid night air. But something else pulsed deeper within her strength. Don't look back, Luke instructed, his heart racing. And so they did, through the tall grass, across the open field, sprinting toward the distant glow of the town's lights like ships drawn to a beacon. Clara's breath grew ragged, the adrenaline pushing her body to its limits. She could almost feel her father's anger trailing behind them, a tempest roaring, threatening to swallow everything in its wake. We're almost there, Luke urged, the town appearing more vividly with every stride. Just as they broke free onto the road leading into the town, a familiar shout echoed behind them. You can't run from me, girl. Clara stumbled, but Luke was there, catching her and holding her close. He said, his voice unwavering. With the warmth of his hand on her back, Clara found a burst of energy, pushing herself to the limit. And in that moment, everything shifted. Their fears and hurt began to fade behind them like the remnants of a nightmare released to the wind. As they neared the town, flashes of the sheriff's office loomed in view, solid ground in a chaotic world. Luke led Clara toward the entrance, the reassuring lights inviting them in. A burly sheriff asked, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the worn-out cowboy and the girl trembling beside him. Clara felt a wave of desperation crashing over her. My father, he tied me up." The sheriff's face turned somber, recognizing the gravity of the situation. As they entered, Clara's heart raced, uncertainty mingling with a growing hope. She asked, the depth of her trauma surfacing raw and real. "Absolutely," the sheriff assured her, his voice firm and steady. "This is a safe place." But before relief could wash over her, the door swung open violently and her father staggered in, eyes wild-filled with the dark desperation of a man who had lost control. "Clara!" Luke stood firm, positioning himself between Clara and her father, a protector ready to fight if needed. "You have no right to lay a hand on her," he declared, his voice a low growl of authority. The sheriff stepped forward, his demeanor shifting to that of a commanding officer. "Back away, sir. You need to leave." The air thickened with tension, Clara's heartbeat echoing in her ears like a war drum. Her father's face twisted with rage but faltered. He was outnumbered, cornered, and suddenly the overwhelming grip of power he held over her began to slip away. He spat before stumbling back out into the night, leaving behind the chaos that had once dominated their lives. In that moment, Clara felt a powerful shift. It was as if the chains binding her spirit were finally shattered, and in the wake of her father's exit, she was left with the faint glimmer of hope sparkling through the murky shadows of her past. The sheriff turned to her, gentle but firm. "You're safe now, Clara." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the promise of safety and the dawning light of a new tomorrow. Luke stood beside her, the weight of their shared journey apparent. "You did it," he whispered, the pride evident in his voice. Clara looked at him, gratitude flooding her heart. "I couldn't have done it without you." "No," he interjected, a fiery spark in his eyes. "You always had the strength." As the sheriff gathered details and made arrangements for Clara's safety, a strange sense of calm enveloped the room. The chaos outside began to fade, replaced by the certainty of a new chapter ahead, one where Clara could rewrite the story of her life. In the days that followed, Clara learned to reclaim her identity, her laughter ringing through the halls of the sheriff's office, a melody of resilience against the past. The scars of her father's betrayal remained, but so did the strength of her spirit, which grew like wildflowers breaking through concrete, a vivid testament to survival and courage. And as for Luke, the cowboy who had stepped into her life like an unexpected guardian, he remained steadfast, an ally as she navigated the rocky terrain of healing. In this sprawling landscape of the West, they discovered that true freedom meant embracing kindness and fortitude in the face of darkness. Clara found within herself the power to forge a new path, where love, respect, and strength would guide her forward, a journey where she could finally write her own story, free from the shadows of her past. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. The air crackled with tension as if the earth itself held its breath, anticipating something extraordinary. Amidst the rustling grasses and distant calls of birds, a single cry sliced through the hush. "Help!" The desperate plea was a sharp knife in the silence, pulling at the heartstrings of anyone who might hear it. And how could a man like Cowboy Luke Baker ignore such a sound? He was made of grit and determination, a man who had faced the worst life could throw at him. But this was a call he couldn't turn away from. Clenching the reins of his horse, he urged the beast forward. With every stride, the anxieties that bubbled beneath the surface grew heavier. Who needed help? Why were they calling for it? As he rode closer, the dust kicked up at his horse's hooves seemed to whisper secrets that only the wind could understand. A dilapidated wooden fence came into view, sagging under the weight of neglect. And there, silhouetted against the fading light, was a young woman, tied to a post. Clara was barely 18, and fear radiated from her like a beacon. Her hands were bound tightly, raw from struggling, and her wide eyes glinted with tears that threatened to spill over. "Stay calm," Luke called, jumping off his horse and racing toward her. The urgency in her eyes made his heart race faster than any gallop. Clara cried again, voice trembling with fear that echoed in the chilling evening air. "My father, he's drunk." The words hit Luke like a punch to the gut. A father, the supposed protector of his child, had instead become the very monster that haunted her nights. "Just hold on," he urged, kneeling before her, forcing himself to stay composed despite the anger boiling beneath his surface. He worked at the ropes, feeling each cruel knot against his fingers. As he pulled, he looked directly into her tear-streaked face. "You're stronger than you think." An errant brush of wind whipped around them, bringing with it the faint scent of liquor. The implication sent shivers down Luke's spine, heightening his sense of urgency. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the house, a door slamming open, and a voice erupted from within. "Clara!" The voice was drenched in anger, thick like the smoke of a wildfire. Fear flickered in Clara's eyes, and Luke's resolve hardened. He hastened his movements, feeling the tightness of the ropes give way beneath his determination. "You're gonna have to trust me," he said, meeting her gaze. With one final tug, the last knot slipped free and the rope fell away. Clara gasped, rubbing her sore wrists as if the release ignited a flame deep inside her. "Thank you, but they didn't have time for words." Luke could hear heavy footsteps stomping toward them, punctuated by furious shouting. "Clara!" Each syllable carried the weight of violence, a promise echoed in drunken slurs. Luke's heart raced faster, pumping adrenaline through his veins like wildfire. He urged, grabbing her hand before she could even react. Clara asked, her voice shaky, glancing toward the looming structure behind her. "Anywhere but here," Luke replied, tugging her toward a line of trees that would shield them from her father's wrath. The sight of her father, swaying and growling like an animal, filled Luke with a fury he had never known. This was not how it was supposed to be. A daughter should be loved, cherished. They darted into the woods, the branches like fingers reaching out to clasp them, hiding their flight. Clara kept pace with him, urgency and fear igniting a spark of defiance within her. Each shared glance was a reminder that she was not alone anymore. Through the dense trees, the shadows intertwined, creating a sanctuary of sorts, giving them time to breathe. Clara's anxiety was palpable. She felt her father's rage lingering behind them like a dark cloud threatening to consume everything in its path. She whispered, her breath shaky, "Then we'll keep moving. He won't catch us." "Not today," Luke promised, though he knew they had to stay one step ahead. They had a chance now, but that chance was fragile, like a freshly unfurled leaf caught in a bitter wind. "Please," her voice cracked, fear creeping back in. "He's still my father." Luke stopped, turning to face her. "He made his choices. You aren't responsible for his mistakes or his demons." In that moment, a flicker of understanding crossed Clara's face, a brief recognition of the truth. She was not to blame for the burden her father had placed upon her shoulders. For so long, that weight had threatened to crush her spirit, but now, standing here, she felt the possibility of lifting it. As they pressed on, the woods thinned out, leading to an open field that stretched toward the distant glow of the town's lights. Clara gasped, a mix of fear and wonder washing over her. "Yeah," Luke replied, a nod of encouragement pushing them both forward. Just as they reached the edge of the field, Clara's father's voice rang out once more, feral and furious. "You think you can just run away from me?" Her heart raced, each word igniting her every fear. "Not if we're quick," Luke insisted, determination fueling his resolve. The noise of her father crashing through the underbrush was growing closer, a reminder that the fight was not yet over. They crossed onto the dirt road, feet pounding against the ground with the rhythm of their racing hearts. Clara could hear everything, the crack of branches, the rustle of grass, but above all, the thud of her heartbeat in her ears. As they sprinted toward the town, Clara felt alive for the first time in years. Freedom was just ahead, and even though the shadows of her past would always linger, she refused to let them define her future. Luke called out, glancing back to gauge their distance. But the moment was cut short as they neared the town's edges. Clara's father stumbled onto the dirt road, blocking their escape, distorted by rage and liquor. He cried, his face twisted and unfamiliar, a mask of fury. The sight sent chills down Clara's spine. She pulled back instinctively, the urge to hide surging through every fiber of her being. But Luke stepped forward, drawing a line between her and the encroaching chaos. His voice was steady, unwavering despite the storm that brewed on the other side. The confrontation was electric, a standoff charged with unspoken fears and decisions that would shape their lives forever. Her father sneered, taking a menacing step forward. "I'm the man who won't let you hurt her anymore," Luke replied, the fire in his eyes growing. "You've lost your chance at being a father, you're just a drunk." The words were like bullets, aimed straight at the heart of her father's substance-fueled bravado. Behind Luke's fierce protection, Clara began to feel a slight fracturing of the power her father held over her. The truth was coming to light. Her father shouted back, desperation creeping into his tone. But before things could spiral, Clara moved out from behind Luke, the fear bubbling within her shifting into a storm of bravery. She exclaimed, her voice emerging stronger than she ever believed possible. "I deserve more than this." Her father's anger faltered, confusion swirling in his drunken gaze. But Luke stood firm, every part of him a bulwark protecting her newfound strength. "You need help," Luke said, his tone unwavering. Clara took a deep breath, each word breaking down the cycle of fear that had haunted her for so long. "I'm breaking free. I'm going to be who I want to be." The air thickened with the weight of her declaration, and for the first time it struck Luke how much that moment meant. It wasn't just a declaration against her father, it was the embodiment of her escape from years of pain, loss, and guilt. Her father's face twisted in disbelief, and in that fleeting moment Clara could see the man who was once her protector fading away, replaced by a shadow. "You're just a child," he spat, rage simmering as he took another step forward. Luke interjected fiercely, "No, she's a woman who knows her worth. You need to leave." Just then, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the tension, two townsfolk appearing out of the darkness. The sheriff's badge glinted in the moonlight. He called, his voice a steady load of authority that filled the night air. Clara could feel the gravity of the situation shift. The presence of the law sent a wave of relief crashing over her. She cried out, her plea cutting through the chaos as the truth surged forth. "He's my father, but he's hurt me for too long." The sheriff's eyes widened as he surveyed the scene, his expression turning solemn. As the town officers approached, Clara's father hesitated, recognizing that his power waned against them. He staggered back, drunk and disoriented, an image of a man defeated by his own demons. He howled, but the words fluttered weakly in the air. "You're not going to hurt her again," the sheriff stated firmly, stepping forward to block his path. The weight of the law was tangible, and Clara felt a flicker of hope igniting in her heart. "No," he shouted desperately. "Not the kind of father who deserves her," Luke said, feeling the chains of the past snap behind them as Clara stepped closer to the officers. The sheriff spoke with authority. "We're taking you in for questioning." At that moment, Clara felt weightless, as if the universe had conspired to shatter her chains and prepare her for flight. The pieces of her past clattered to the ground, the darkness retreating as she stood once again on the precipice of freedom. As they led her father away, Clara turned to Luke, who stood resolutely at her side. "Thank you," she breathed, the words barely making it past her lips. "I just gave you the push you needed," he replied, a hint of a smile gracing his rugged face. "You did the hard work." She stepped closer, feeling the warmth of his presence soothe the edges of her spirit. The terror that had gripped her heart for so long finally began to dissipate, illuminating the path ahead. With the weight of her father's control lifted, Clara knew she could finally exhale. She had choices now. She could forge her own identity, one free from fear, guilt, and shame. The sheriff, sensing the shift, shifted his attention back to them. "We'll make sure you're safe, Clara." In the days that followed, Clara began to reclaim her world. Townsfolk offered support, and she found solace in kind words and warm embraces. Little by little, she allowed herself to believe she was worthy of love, respect, and kindness. Luke remained by her side, a steadfast protector who never wavered. Together, they forged a bond, two souls connected by a shared journey towards healing and hope. In that small town, as the sun rose each morning, Clara began to flourish, embracing every moment of newfound freedom. She began to weave her story amongst the vibrant threads of others, a tapestry of resilience and bravery. And as she moved forward, she would never forget the cowboy who believed in her strength when she could barely believe in herself. Luke taught her that she was not defined by her past, and with every step she took into the light, she drew closer to the life she was meant to live, one where she was the author of her own tale, free from the shadows that once held her captive. In this unfolding journey, Clara found a purpose: to honor her strength and share her story, ensuring that others never felt alone or unheard. Each encounter became a brushstroke in the masterpiece of her new life. Freedom was no longer just a dream. It was her reality, bright and vivid like the sunrise painting the vast western sky. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a fiery glow over the dusty plains. The air was thick with tension as a lone cowboy named Luke Baker rode his horse through the fields, the rhythmic clop of hooves breaking the silence. Something felt off, though like a storm brewing just out of sight. Then he heard it, a cry desperate and sharp slicing through the evening air. "Help!" The sound rang with panic, echoing off the rugged landscape. It was a plea that demanded attention. Luke's heart raced. He pulled back on the reins, stopping his horse and listening intently. Following the sound, he pushed forward, the tension rising with every clop of hooves. As he neared an old wooden fence, he spotted her, a young girl no older than 18, bound to the fence post, her hands tied tightly with rough rope. She looked up at him, fear etched across her face. "Please help me, my father. He's drunk again." Her voice trembled, the words tumbling out in a rush of desperation. Without a second thought, Luke dismounted and hurried to her side. Every bit of him felt the gravity of the moment. He knelt before her, fingers working at the knots that bound her wrists. The ropes were tight, and he could see the anger and ignorance that had held her captive. Behind him, the sound of heavy footsteps thudded against the ground. A voice, slurred and menacing, bellowed from the house, "Clara." Clara's face went pale. "He'll come back." Time slipped through Luke's fingers like sand. He tore at the ropes, urgency thrumming in his chest. "I'm almost there," he promised, wishing he could do more than just untie her. The sickening scent of alcohol wafted closer. The final knot slipped free and the rope fell to the ground with a muted thud. Clara rubbed her wrists, tears welling in her eyes, a mix of relief and fear. "Thank you. Anywhere but here," Luke said, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Just then the front door of the house flew open and the figure of her father emerged, red-faced, stumbling, eyes clouded with rage. "Clara!" A jolt of fear shot through Clara. "Please, listen to me," Luke said firmly, gripping her shoulders to steady her. "You're safe, you've just got to trust me." They darted into the trees, the surrounding woods swallowing their flight. Clara's heart raced, each thump echoing the roaring adrenaline coursing through her veins. The woods wrapped around them, muffling the world outside. She could feel Luke's presence beside her, steady and unwavering, a refuge amidst the chaos. "We could go to town," Clara whispered, glancing down at the ground, trying to catch her breath. "We'll find safety there. But we need to keep moving," Luke replied, urgency lacing his words. The air felt electric with tension, a storm brewing both inside and outside. The sound of her father's voice echoed through the trees, stumbling close behind. The drunken rage seeped into the shadows, pursuing them like a predator tracking its prey. "Clara!" Clara pressed forward, fear igniting her every movement. She had a fleeting memory of being a little girl, playing amongst the flowers in the meadow. Those moments had long since faded into the background of her life, overshadowed by the darkness her father had enveloped her in. Luke urged, eyes scanning their surroundings. Just ahead, the trees began to thin out. She gasped, panic rising in her throat. "We can't let him," Luke replied resolutely. "This is your chance to break free." The trees opened into a clearing, and Clara felt the cool breeze brush against her skin for the first time in ages. The sensation was foreign yet exhilarating. Ahead lay the town, a distant glimmer of safety, a sanctuary where she could finally breathe. Luke took her hand, their fingers interlocking like a lifeline. The softness of his grip felt stronger than the fear chaining her down. He asked, and she nodded, determination coursing through her veins. They darted across the open field, her heart racing with every step. The threatening shouts of her father faded as they approached the edge of town. She could see lights flickering from the buildings, the warmth inviting them closer. But just as they crossed onto the dirt road, an angry figure emerged from the shadows. Her father stood there, wild-eyed and seething. Clara. Every instinct urged her to run, to hide, but the fierce resolve in Luke's eyes kept her grounded. "You need to stay behind me," he commanded, the authority in his voice breaking through her panic. Her father roared, staggering toward them, encroaching like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. "I'm someone who won't let you harm her," Luke said, stepping forward, unwavering. The man's drunken bravado stood no chance against Luke's conviction. "You've lost your chance to be a father." Her father spat back, yet there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, and Clara felt a thrill of victory rush through her. "Clara deserves better than this," Luke declared, unwavering. "You need to leave her alone." In that charged moment, Clara could feel her heart pounding. Her father's grip over her life was slipping away. She took a step forward, her voice steady and filled with newfound strength. "You're not going to control me anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her past but liberating at the same time. The flicker of uncertainty in her father's eyes turned to fear and rage. He swayed slightly, losing his footing against the truth she had just unleashed. He croaked, desperation creeping into his tone. "No," she shot back. "I'm a woman." The air crackled with tension. The sheriff's voice carried through the evening air, his presence reassuring as he strode toward them. He asked, glancing between Clara, Luke, and her father. Suddenly aware of the law's arrival, Clara's father's bravado began to crumble. "This," he slurred, stumbling back as the sheriff moved in. The sheriff's calm demeanor shifted as he took in the scene: Clara's tear-streaked face, Luke's steadfast stance, and the obvious disarray of the man before him. "Step back," he ordered, his voice clipped, a reflection of authority. Clara found herself taking a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The tension between them shifted like a wake of a past ship. Her father's anger flickered, and Clara knew this was her moment. "I'm done living in fear," she declared, her voice clear, filled with conviction. With the sheriff stepping up, the darkness that had loomed over her felt like it was finally receding. "We'll take care of this," he assured her, turning to face her father. Her father's face twisted in disbelief, drunken anger clashing against the inevitable truth. "You can't take her away from me." "No, sir," the sheriff replied, his voice firm. "She belongs to herself." Without a word, her father staggered back, the fight draining from him, powerless against the tide that had turned against him. Clara felt a surge of triumph surge through her, as if every chain had been unshackled. As her father was led away, Clara turned to Luke, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she murmured, the gratitude pouring from her heart. "You did this," Luke replied, a smile breaking through the tension. "You found your voice." The nights that followed were filled with the kind of hope she had long forgotten, the friendly smiles of townsfolk, the warm embraces that made her feel so supported. A community began to mend her shattered pieces, each act of kindness a balm for her soul. The sheriff checked in regularly, guiding her through the process of healing. She began to understand what love truly felt like, free of control, filled with respect, and permeated with kindness. Luke remained by her side, a steadfast presence who offered protection without suffocating. Together, they forged a bond that went beyond words, sharing laughter and stories under starlit skies, shedding the remnants of their previous struggles. With each passing day, Clara grew bolder, taking classes, making friends, and slowly, ever so slowly, reclaiming the life that had been snatched away from her. Life was no longer defined by hiding in the shadows. It was bursting with colorful possibilities, each moment a gift. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, Clara turned to Luke, a sense of warmth blossoming in her chest. "Do you ever think about how you showed up just when I needed you? It was like..." Luke chuckled softly, glancing up at the sky where stars twinkled like diamonds. "Your strength helped me find my own," she replied. As the days flowed into months, Clara not only learned to stand tall, but she also found purpose in sharing her experiences, supporting others trapped beneath the weight of their own circumstances. The girl once bound to a fence turned into a beacon of hope for those still lost in the darkness. In the end, she was not just freed from her father's grip, she had reclaimed her life. and in doing so, she became a force of her own. With Luke at her side, she learned how to ride the unpredictable waves of life, determined to create a future painted with her own colors, rich with experiences, love, and resilience. And on those quiet, still nights, as the stars twinkled overhead, she would often turn to the man who had fought for her freedom and whisper a quiet thank you to the universe. Because sometimes, in a world painted with shadows, all it takes is a little light, a spark of bravery, a breath of fresh air, and the unwavering belief that one can rise above the darkness and shine. A soft breeze whispered through the tall grasses of the open plains, the kind of evening that felt deceptively peaceful. But within that serenity, a chilling cry pierced the air. "Help, please!" The voice was raw, filled with desperation and fear. It wove through the rustling grass and reached the ears of a lone cowboy named Luke Baker. He was riding through the fields, dust swirling around him, when the cry sent an electric jolt through his body. He strained to listen, his heart racing as he turned his horse toward the sound. The distant farmhouse stood there, old and forgotten, a neglected shadow of its former self. But there by the fence, Luke's stomach dropped. An 18-year-old girl tied to a worn fence post struggled against ropes that bound her wrists. Her name was Clara, a girl caught in a world of darkness. "Hold on," Luke shouted, dismounting swiftly. He could see the fear in her eyes, the wild worry, the hope. As he rushed to her side, he felt the urgency grip him like a vice. "Please, he'll be back." Clara's voice quivered, tears glistening on her cheeks. Luke asked, bending low to examine the knots binding her. But as he worked at the ropes, he already knew. A father meant to protect her had become her captor. "My father, he's drunk. He says I disobeyed him," she cried, her words sharp and rushed. Luke's jaw clenched. No parent should act like this. The anger simmered just beneath the surface, but he had to stay focused. He had to free her from this hell. "Just hold on," he urged, his fingers working swiftly, untangling the knots. Time was not on their side. He could hear the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. But even as he worked, Clara's eyes widened in fear. "He's coming, you don't understand." "Not if I can help it," Luke said, forcing himself to be calm. He tugged at the rope, feeling the fibers give way. The last knot loosened, and the rope fell to the dirt like a stale echo of her captivity. Clara rubbed her sore wrists, but her eyes were still filled with dread. The sound of the door slamming open reverberated through the night. "Clara!" Panic surged through her, and Luke felt it pulsate in the air between them. "We need to go." He gripped her hand, urgency fueling his every action. As they bolted toward the nearby trees, Luke could see her father stumbling out of the house, his face twisted in rage and confusion. "Clara!" The sheer terror on Clara's face made Luke's heart race faster. She stumbled slightly, but he pulled her forward. "Don't look back." They reached the tree line, slipping into the shadow of the trees. The sounds of the night wrapped around them, blocking out the chaos behind. Clara's breath was ragged as she pressed against the rough bark of an old oak tree. She whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Anywhere but here," Luke replied, searching the shadows for a glimpse of her father. "We'll make it to town." Clara's eyes were wide, filled with uncertainty. "He won't." Each word surged with determination. The weight of those words swirled in Clara's chest, mixing with the turbulence of fear and hope. Trust, after everything. But there was something about Luke. He was calm, steady like an anchor in a wild sea. "Okay," she finally said, and together they sprinted deeper into the woods. The trees whispered around them, flickering shadows darting between the branches as if the very world was urging them on. Soon, they reached the edge of the woods, and in the distance, the lights of the town twinkled like stars fallen to earth, offering a glimpse of safety. Clara felt the urge to cry, relief mingling with anxiety. "He won't. Not if we stick together," Luke assured, squeezing her hand reassuringly. As they emerged from the trees, adrenaline pushed them forward. The open field spread out before them, a fragile barrier between the safety of civilization and the looming threat of her father. The night air seemed charged with tension, each breath filled with uncertainty. But before they could take another step, Clara's father burst from the woods behind them, lumbering like a beast unleashed. "Clara!" Her heart sank, the sound of his voice both familiar and terrifying. Luke shouted, urging her forward as they sprinted toward the glow of the town lights. They crossed the field, the raw urgency propelling them faster than they thought possible. Luke panted, eyes locked on the distant sanctuary, but Clara could hear her father's drunken wrath trailing behind them, a storm threatening to engulf everything in its path. "Please." She gasped, fear surging within her, the words melting from her lips as they dashed. Luke called back, determination fueling their flight, but even as they ran, she could sense the looming threat of her father's rage. "Stop!" The shouts grew nearer, filling the night air with panic as they raced toward the edge of the town. They burst into the street, the lights illuminating their path and a vibrant life pulsating around them. But Clara's heart pounded wildly, fear gripping her tight. "What if he comes here?" "He won't if we ask for help. We'll go to the sheriff," Luke replied, his assurance unwavering. With that, they headed toward the sheriff's office, Clara's heart racing with each step. The world around her was alive, a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed her for so long. As they approached the door, a figure stepped outside, an older man with a badge gleaming in the light. He recognized the urgency in their eyes, sensing the weight of their whispers. "Please," Clara choked, her voice breaking. He's been hurting me." The sheriff's demeanor softened as he listened, turning to Luke for confirmation. "You're safe here," he assured, stepping aside to let them in. But just as they crossed the threshold, a loud crash echoed behind them and her father stumbled into view. "Clara!" His words were a fraying rope of fury, each syllable coated in a haze of alcohol. Luke stepped forward, tension crackling in the air. "You need to back off," he said firmly, standing tall between Clara and her raging father. "You've lost your chance to be a father." Her father bellowed, stumbling closer, fueled by anger and pride. But Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. Luke's position filled her with a fierce spark of bravery. She shouted, her voice soaring, fueled by newfound courage. "I won't be your prisoner any longer." The words hung in the air, echoing against the walls and finally breaking the chains that had bound her spirit for so long. Her father's anger faltered, confusion rippling through his drunken haze. He wavered, processing her defiance. The sheriff stepped in, his voice sharp and authoritative. "You need to leave. Now." Clara's heart raced as the sheriff called for backup, authority swelling in the room. The chaos began to settle and her father's bravado faded under the weight of his reality. He spat, retreating into the shadows from whence he came. As the door closed behind him, Clara felt as if a massive weight had shifted off her shoulders. She hadn't just escaped. She had found her voice and reclaimed her power, standing resolute against the storm that once controlled her. "Thank you," Clara whispered to Luke, tears pooling in her eyes. "You did all the hard work," he replied, a warm smile crossing his face. That night, the sheriff assured Clara that she would be safe. Officers would patrol the area and her father wouldn't be able to cause her harm again. It felt surreal, the promise of safety, of being allowed to live without fear. In the following days, Clara found herself in a whirlwind of support. The community enveloped her like a comforting embrace. Neighbors offered warm meals, friendly smiles, and encouragement. Clara gradually opened up about her experiences, and the burden of silence began to fade. As the sun rose over the town, she learned to embrace the idea of freedom, letting go of the ghost of her past. Each moment was a step toward healing, a chance to build a life anew. Luke was always by her side, encouraging her to rise above the shadows that still lingered. Together, they forged a bond of friendship and unyielding support, sharing laughter beneath the stars as they wove their stories together. Clara asked one evening, the soft glow of the moon illuminating their faces. Luke chuckled, glancing at her with warmth in his eyes. "Maybe, but it was your strength that brought you here." Days turned into weeks, and Clara found her footing again. She took classes, made friends, and embraced the world that had once felt so suffocating. Hope blossomed within her, a garden of resilience sprouting through the cracks left by her father. As she reclaimed her life, Clara became an advocate for others who found themselves trapped in cycles of abuse. She spoke at community gatherings, sharing her story and emphasizing the strength within each person to rise against darkness. Though she was on a path of healing, every now and then, the memories would creep back. The weight of her father's shadow sometimes followed her, whispering stories of fear, but Clara learned how to combat that voice with her newfound strength. One night, as Clara sat with Luke beneath a blanket of stars, she spoke of her journey. "I want others to know they can rise above," she told him, her voice steady. "You're already doing that," Luke replied, pride shimmering in his gaze. As they sat in the quiet, sharing dreams of the future, Clara realized her courage was no longer bound. She had managed to break free of more than just physical chains. She had unlocked the door to her spirit and discovered not just herself, but her purpose as well. The cowboy who had freed her that fateful night became a friend who had shown her what it meant to truly live. With every laugh, every shared moment, Clara reclaimed her life, along with every piece of hope she thought had vanished. And as time flowed forward, she knew she would never be that girl tied to a fence ever again. She embraced the world, ready to write the next chapter of her life, a story filled with love, light, and the unshakable knowledge that freedom wasn't just an escape. It was a state of being she had reclaimed for herself. In the heart of the West, where the sun set like a painting across the sky, Clara thrived, her spirit unyielding, forever embodying the courage it took to break free, lift her voice, and finally live. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty plains. In that moment, a violent commotion shattered the evening calm. A desperate voice cut through the tranquil air, shouting for help. "Help me, please." The urgency in her cry sent a chill down the spine of Luke Baker, a seasoned cowboy with dirt-stained jeans and a weathered hat. He had seen his share of troubles, but this cry clawed at something deep within him. Without hesitating, he kicked his horse into a gallop, the landscape blurring past as he raced toward the sound. As he approached, the dilapidated farmhouse came into view, and everything felt off. The air was thick with tension and fear, the kind that could choke even the strongest man. And then he saw her, a young girl no older than 18, tied to a fence post, her wrists cruelly bound by rough rope. Her wide eyes shone with terror, glistening under the fading light. "Stay calm," Luke shouted, dismounting swiftly, directing his anxious energy toward her. He knelt down, his fingers already working at the knots that had cruelly confined her. "Please, you have to hurry." The girl's voice trembled, panic etched across her delicate features. "My father, he's drunk." With every word she spoke, Luke could feel the weight of her suffering. A father should protect his child, not turn into a tormentor. Anger surged through him, but he kept his focus on the ropes. "You're going to be okay," he promised, his voice steady and calm. Tugging at the knots, he felt them slip. But in the distance, the sound of a door slamming open echoed like a thunderclap, followed by a drunken roar. "Clara!" Clara's eyes widened, fear wrapping around her like a vice. Luke shouted, his hands finally freeing her. He grabbed her arm, urgency fueling his motions. Time was of the essence. As they dashed toward the safety of the trees, Clara stumbled, glancing back in sheer terror. "He'll hurt me," Luke insisted, a fierce determination igniting within him. "We won't let that happen." They slipped into the cover of the woods, Clara's heart pounding like a drum, the frantic rhythm mirroring her state of mind. As they pressed deeper into the shadows, she struggled to catch her breath. "We get to town. There are people who can help you," Luke said, his voice a soothing balm against her fear. But as he scanned the area, he could hear the ragged shouts of her father echoing through the trees, searching for her like a predator on the hunt. The voice thundered, filled with anger and desperation. Clara's heart raced, each pulse sending waves of panic crashing over her. She had always been taught to fear her father, and the idea of escaping that fear felt both impossibly brave and utterly terrifying. "That's why we have to keep moving," Luke urged gently, prodding her to focus. "You're not alone anymore." Through the tangled underbrush, they pressed on, each step bringing them closer to the horizon and what felt like safety. Clara could feel the weight lifting, but shadows loomed behind them. The sound of footsteps grew louder as her father's fury echoed closer. "Clara, you're mine." His voice slurred but was still saturated with a primal threat. "No." Clara's voice trembled as adrenaline surged again. They burst through the tree line and into an open field, the vast expanse stretching out like a canvas upon which they could paint their escape. "Look." Luke pointed ahead, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth, offering a glimmer of hope. But just as they were about to take that final step, Clara's father burst from the shadows, overwhelming and feral, eyes wild and filled with rage. He roared, taking a menacing step forward. Luke instructed sharply, positioning himself between Clara and her approaching father, a wall ready to shield her from the storm. Her father yelled, swaying as he crashed through the tall grass. "Someone who won't let you hurt her anymore," Luke stated firmly, his expression hardening as he stood his ground. "You need to leave her alone." Clara's heart raced, a cocktail of fear and courage bubbling within her. It was one thing to be afraid, it was another to fight back. "I'm not scared of you," she shouted, raw defiance spilling from her lips. The moment hung in the air, charged and electric. Clara's father faltered, uncertainty flashing across his drunken features. She could see him losing control, the twisted grip of power slipping through his fingers. Before he could respond, the sheriff emerged from the shadows, his presence a beacon of authority. "What's going on?" Clara's father turned, furious, but the grip of alcohol clouded his judgment. "They're trying to take my daughter." "No," the sheriff asserted, stepping closer. "She belongs to herself." Luke could feel the weight lift further from Clara, the entanglement of fear slowly unraveling. The sheriff's authority added a layer of safety. She was being protected in a way she had never experienced before. "No," her father yelled, desperation coating his voice, but the hardened gaze of the sheriff pushed him back. "Let's get you away from him," the sheriff said to Clara, his kindness evident. Clara nodded, and Luke gently placed a hand on her shoulder, a silent promise of safety. "Thank you," she breathed, filled with overwhelming relief. Standing beside her, Luke smiled, his presence still a steady support. The sheriff ushered Clara away from her father, leading her into the town where people began to gather, murmuring in concern and curiosity. Clara asked, anxiety still bubbling in her chest. The sheriff shook his head confidently. As the night unfolded, Clara began to transition from fear to hope. The town buzzed around her, people sharing stories of strength, resilience, and community. She had spent so long wrapped in her father's world of anger and control, but now she was stepping into the light. Days turned into weeks, and Clara found support from the townspeople. A woman named Ruth welcomed her into her home, a kind-hearted soul who had faced her own battles. She offered Clara a safe space to heal and grow. "Thank you, Ruth," Clara said one evening, looking around at the warmth and laughter that filled the room. Ruth smiled gently. "Everyone deserves to feel safe." With that encouragement, Clara began to rebuild her life. She attended community events, shared her story, and found strength in the connections she formed. The scars of her past would always be there, but they were no longer chains binding her. They became the stories that shaped her resilience. Luke remained a steadfast ally. He visited often, sharing his own stories, tales of life on the range, challenges he faced, and lessons learned under the vast, open sky. They forged a bond grounded in mutual respect, friendship, and unwavering support. One day, as they strolled along the riverbank, Clara turned to Luke. "You know, it feels strange. Those memories can linger," he said gently. She asked, vulnerability creeping back into her voice. "By embracing the freedom you fought for," he replied. "You're not that girl anymore." The more Clara embraced her new life, the more she began to flourish. She took up hobbies she never thought possible and even joined a local program where she could help others who had faced similar struggles. With each passing day, she grew bolder. The girl who was once bound to a fence became a beacon of hope for those still trapped in their darkness. Clara spoke openly about her experience, emphasizing the importance of seeking help and the power of community support. One night, during a community gathering, she stood in front of a crowd, her heart racing. "I was lost, but I am found," she declared, her voice echoing with strength. The audience erupted in applause, each clap a step toward healing not just for Clara, but for others like her. Support flowed from every corner of the town, and the sense of unity made her heart swell. After her speech, Luke approached her, pride shining in his eyes. "You did it, Clara." "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied, a warm smile spreading across her face. As weeks turned into months, Clara found herself standing on the threshold of a new life. The weight of the past had not vanished, but transformed into a foundation for her strength. She knew she could face whatever challenges awaited her. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Clara turned to Luke. "Freedom doesn't mean forgetting," Luke said, the setting sun catching the lines on his weathered face. With determination, Clara nodded. She was ready to take the next step. She wanted to share her story beyond the town, to reach out to others who needed hope. "Maybe I could write about it," she suggested, a spark igniting in her eyes. "That's a brilliant idea," Luke encouraged. With that idea planted firmly in her heart, Clara began to write. She poured her soul onto the pages, recounting the struggle, the pain, but most importantly, the freedom she had found. Each word was liberating, and as her story unfolded, she felt lighter. She wanted to reach those still bound by fear and darkness, enticing them to hope for a brighter tomorrow. The time came when Clara shared her written story with the community. They gathered in the town square for what felt like a celebration, a testament to resilience. She read her pages aloud, her voice steady and strong, each word echoing with the power of truth. "I was once tied to a fence," she said, her eyes glimmering with emotion. "But now I stand here free. You can be free too." As the last words left her lips, the crowd erupted in applause, and Clara felt the warmth of acceptance and support envelop her. The journey had transformed her from a scared girl into a woman filled with hope, purpose, and strength. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she realized that the fence in her past had not only held her captive, it had also propelled her toward a powerful awakening. Luke smiled proudly as Clara basked in the love and encouragement from her community, the cowboy who had freed her standing beside her, a testament to the power of connection and belief. Together, they had forged a story of resilience, and Clara knew she would never again be a prisoner of fear. She was a warrior, ready to embrace whatever challenges life had in store, forever carrying the flame of hope in her heart. And as the stars began to twinkle in the vast sky, Clara stood tall, ready to write the next chapter, a tale of freedom, resilience, and a life never bound again. A piercing scream cut through the thick, still air of the countryside, echoing off the hills like a warning bell. "Help!" The voice trembled with desperation, a sound that clawed at the heart of anyone who might hear it. Luke Baker, a rugged cowboy with years of experience under the harsh sun, instinctively turned his horse toward the source of the cry. The prairies might seem endless, but in this moment there was only one thing that mattered: that girl's voice. As he galloped toward the dilapidated barn on the edge of the property, the sight became clearer. An 18-year-old girl, wild hair tangled and cluttered with dirt, was tied to a weathered wooden fence post. Panic gripped her face and tears glistened in her wide eyes, reflecting the last rays of the dying sun. "Stay calm," Luke shouted, dismounting and rushing to her side. The sight ignited a fire in his chest, a relentless urge to protect and defend. "Please, I'm Clara. You have to get me out of here. My father, he's drunk." The fear washed over her, drowning out any glimmer of hope. "Hang tight, Clara." Luke knelt and began working the knots that bound her wrists. The coarse rope bit into her skin, but they were nothing compared to the torment she faced daily. Just then, the sound of a door slamming open shattered the calm of the evening air. "Clara!" A low growl filled with menace echoed from the barn. Clara's face drained of color as she glanced at the approaching figure, her father swaying from drink, eyes filled with rage. Clara screamed, panic surging through her. "He'll kill you," Luke replied, tugging harder at the knot. Time was slipping away, and with every second that passed, her father's footsteps grew louder. He barked again, fury dripping from his words. "You think you can just run?" With adrenaline pumping in his veins, Luke understood what he had to do. "You need to trust me." "I'm going to get you out of this," he said, meeting her terrified gaze. The purity of her fear ignited something deep within him, a need to protect, to rescue, to break the cycle. Finally, the rope fell away and Clara's wrists were free. She rubbed them, gasping with relief even as fear lingered in her eyes. "We run," Luke urged, grabbing her hand and bolting toward the trees just at the back of the fence line. As they ran, Clara felt the surge of freedom for the first time in years, a flickering flame igniting against the background of her father's suffocating shadow. But it was accompanied by the weight of the danger close behind. The thud of heavy footsteps pounded the ground, echoing ominously through the dimming light. Her father shouted, a mixture of alcoholic haze and wild rage. Luke urged, squeezing Clara's hand as they raced into the dense trees. Her heart was pounding, fear coursing through her as she glanced back, terrified of what would come next. The world around them transformed into a blur of shadow and sound. Birds rustled in the trees above in alarm, a backdrop to the chaos that unfolded. Each snap of a twig beneath their feet echoed louder than her father's raging voice, a reminder of the danger lurking close behind. Clara gasped, glancing around, her panic bubbling to the surface as they came to a halt behind a large oak. "Anywhere but here. We need to get out of the woods and toward town," Luke said, trying to steady her racing heart with theirs. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Her voice trembled, fragile and worried. "If he finds us, I'll protect you. I promise," Luke said, steel in his voice. "Your father can't control you anymore. You're not his prisoner." A fleeting moment of clarity flashed through Clara's mind, a realization that reflected a long-buried desperation. Breaking free was no longer just a dream. It was happening. Just then, a crash echoed from the direction of the barn, and the furious roar of her father pierced the trees. "Clara!" They crouched low, hearts racing, breath coming in quick gasps. Clara felt the weight of every elapsed second. Fear had a way of distorting time. She could hear his heavy footsteps meandering, stumbling through the underbrush, fueled by liquor and rage. Feeling the pressure build in the air, Luke turned to Clara, his voice low and steady. "When I say go, we're going to run. We'll get to town and we'll find help." Clara nodded, determination flickering in her chest. Luke shouted suddenly, and they dashed from their hiding spot. The thumping of her heart echoed in her ears as they sprinted through the underbrush, branches scratching at their skin. The trees thinned ahead, and Clara's eyes lit up at the sight of lights flickering in the distance. The town lay beyond, a sanctuary waiting for them, but danger still lurked behind. Luke encouraged, pushing through the pain that screamed in their legs. Clara felt adrenaline surge, pushing her forward despite her exhaustion. But just as they barreled through the trees, her father stumbled into sight, his face contorted with fury. "You think you can escape?" Clara froze, fear slickening her spine. Luke pushed her forward, positioning himself protectively in front of her. He bellowed, voice strong and firm. Her father hissed, staggering forward, fists clenching. "I know exactly who you are, and you don't deserve to touch her," Luke replied, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Clara felt her heart race, not just from fear but from the strength Luke radiated. She was no longer alone. Her father shouted, his voice breaking through the tension. Clara screamed back, her voice cracking. And then the world erupted. With one push, Luke took a step forward, a physical barrier between Clara and her father. "You need to back off." He stood firm but unyielding, his gaze unwavering. The sheriff's voice cut through the air just then, a commanding presence. Luke yelled, and the sudden arrival of the sheriff reminded Clara of what hope felt like. The sheriff assessed the scene quickly, the light falling harshly on Clara's father, whose bravado began to wane. "You're going to need to calm down, sir, or I will have to take you in," the sheriff warned, an unwavering calm in the face of chaos. Her father slurred, pausing for a moment, recognizing the authority before him. Clara felt the weight shift, her father's hold on her slipping as the shadows of the night pulled back. She declared, her voice rising with its own defiance. The sheriff stepped closer, that authority radiating from his demeanor. Clara shouted, each word bursting forth like the breaking of a dam. "He's been abusive for years. Then he will not be allowed to take you," the sheriff said firmly, turning back to her father. Her father hesitated, eyes darting between the sheriff and Clara, uncertainty flickering across his face. "This isn't over," he finally spat, stumbling back into the night. As the darkness swallowed him, Clara felt a surge of relief, mixed with a slight panic. She was free, but it felt like the shadows still lingered, ghosting around her edges. As the sheriff moved toward her, Clara felt the fierce connection between herself and Luke, a bond forged in fire, built on trust. "You're safe now," he said, stepping closer, eyes filled with warmth. She whispered, her heart still racing from the adrenaline that coursed through her veins. "It's just the beginning," Luke replied, a gentle reassurance washing over her. "You took the first step." With help from the sheriff, they navigated the next steps together, finding refuge in a small community center nearby. People started gathering to offer warmth and support, faces flooded with concern. The connection between them was palpable, a shared understanding against the darkness. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her father's anger was still lurking, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for its moment. Days turned into weeks, and while Clara started to find herself amidst the chaos, her past continued to shadow her. She attended counseling and shared her story with small groups, each word a stone laid down to build a new foundation. Luke remained a steadfast presence at her side. "You're stronger than you think," he would encourage, gentle and steadfast. But one night, as Clara sat on the porch of the community center, a shiver ran down her spine. Something felt off, as if the air had thickened with tension. Luke asked, noticing her unease. "I can't shake the feeling that he'll come back," she admitted, voice heavy with worry. Before Luke could respond, a sudden clattering sound echoed from the shadows, bringing a chill to the air. A dark figure emerged from the dusk, and every instinct shouted danger. That voice. Clara gasped, dread coiling in her stomach. Her father's voice rang out, delivering a crash of ice through her veins. "You can't hide from me." The moment hung suspended in time. The weight of fear and hostility filled the air like a storm threatening to break. Luke stepped protectively in front of her, a barrier against the chaos. But as her father's figure loomed closer, rage flickering in his eyes like a wildfire, Clara felt the darkness pressing in. What would happen next? Would this nightmare really be over, or had it only just begun? In that gripping moment, everything hung in the balance. The past and the future collided, and Clara realized that this was not just a battle for her freedom, it was a fight for her very soul. And she had no idea how far she was willing to go to reclaim it. A storm was brewing in the high mountains, dark clouds swirling, ready to unleash their fury. Clara stood at the edge of a clearing, her heart racing as she stared at the remnants of what used to be her cabin. The memories of laughter and warmth echoed through her mind like a haunting melody. Each log that had once stood proud and strong now lay scattered on the ground, twisted, broken, and lifeless. Just 2 weeks ago, it had been a cozy retreat, a sanctuary where she'd felt safe. Now it lay in ruins, a victim of nature's relentless power. But even in that moment of despair, Clara felt a spark deep within her. She wouldn't let this storm be the end. No, it would be the beginning of something greater. With a resolve as fierce as the lightning that struck the mountains, she stepped into the chaos, determined to rebuild her home log by log. As Clara gathered the scattered wood, her fingers brushed against the rough bark, each piece feeling like a message from the past. It was a connection to who she was, who she had become since moving here to escape the noise of the city. She wasn't just rebuilding a structure, she was piecing together the fragments of her life. The first day was exhausting. She dragged logs back to what had once been her foundation, her shoulders aching, her hands blistering, but she refused to back down. Each log she lifted reminded her of the warmth of summer evenings spent on the porch, the laughter shared over cozy fires, and the quiet mornings filled with coffee and the sounds of nature waking up. Clara could almost hear the whispers of the wind, urging her on. But she wasn't alone in her struggle. As dusk descended, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara noticed a figure in the distance riding a horse up the narrow path. He was a tall man, wide-shouldered, dressed in a faded flannel shirt and a cowboy hat that shaded his face. His movement was fluid, confident. The horse almost seemed to glide over the rocky terrain. At first, Clara felt a twinge of annoyance. She was used to her solitude, used to being self-reliant. But as he drew closer, she felt an inexplicable curiosity. The cowboy dismounted and approached her, a calm demeanor about him that contrasted sharply with the storm still raging in her heart. He asked, his voice low and steady, like the grounding force of the earth beneath her feet. Clara hesitated. It had always been her mantra to stand on her own 2 feet. She had rebuilt her life after losing everything once before, and she wasn't willing to let anyone think she was weak. But in that moment, something about his presence, the warmth in his eyes, the strength in his stance pulled at her walls. "Actually, I do," she admitted, surprising herself. As he stepped in, taking a log from her hands, she felt a rush of relief wash over her. "I'm Jake," he said simply, his voice as soothing as the twilight settling around them. With Jake's help, they moved in rhythm, a silent understanding unfolding between them. As hours slipped by, the structure began to rise again. Clara shared stories as they worked tales of old memories, dreams lost in the wild storm of life. With each log they positioned, she started to reclaim pieces of herself, rebuilding not just a cabin but a life rich with purpose. Jake listened, nodding silently, as if he understood her every word without needing explanations. His quiet strength made her feel safe, reaffirming her determination to rebuild the cabin and, in time, to rebuild her spirit. Days turned into weeks, and every dawn brought a new challenge. There were times when Clara felt like giving up, standing in the midst of a mess that seemed insurmountable. But Jake was always there, a lighthouse in her tempest, his encouragement wrapped around her like a warm blanket. One afternoon, they were knee-deep in muck, clearing the debris when an unexpected clap of thunder echoed above. The storm had returned, darker this time, threatening heavy rain. Clara's heart raced. She rushed to cover the exposed logs but felt a surge of panic rising in her chest. "Breathe, Clara," Jake said calmly, stepping close and placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch steadied her. In that moment, his words became her anchor. They moved quickly, positioning a tarp over the logs as the rain began to pour. Even as the storm raged, the two of them worked side by side, laughter mingling with the sound of raindrops splattering against the ground. With each passing day, the cabin rose higher, transformed by hard work, grit, and unexpected companionship. Clara felt herself changing too. She was letting go of her fear-driven past and embracing the courage that came from vulnerability. With Jake, she didn't have to wear a mask or pretend she was impervious to pain. Their connection blossomed quietly, like wildflowers among the stones. They'd share meals around a small fire, stories blending into laughter, until the stars began to twinkle like diamonds scattered across a velvet sky. Jake spoke of his childhood, of lessons learned while tending to cattle and living under that expansive sky. Clara felt something shift within her. The lightness in her chest felt unfamiliar but beautiful. She could love fiercely, and the weight of her past didn't have to anchor her down. One evening, as they sat on a log overlooking the valley, Clara's heart thudded in a rhythm she couldn't ignore. The way Jake gazed at the horizon, his silhouette etched against the fading light, made her ache to know him more. What would it be like to trust someone fully, to lean on a partner instead of shouldering the burden alone? Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake turned to her, the soft glow of the moon catching his jawline. "I see you, Clara, not just your struggle but your fire." Those words resonated deep within her. Clara realized the journey wasn't just about rebuilding her cabin, it was about rediscovering herself, allowing new beginnings to take root. The storm clouds began to dissipate, revealing clear skies as the cabin finally took shape. It stood proud against the backdrop of the mountains, a testament to resilience and growth. Each log that went into its making held a story of challenge overcome, of fears faced and partnerships formed. They were now on the last day of construction, excitement buzzing in the air. Clara stood back, taking it all in, a swell of pride filling her chest. Jake joined her, his presence reassuring, and for a moment, it was as if they could see into the future, a life filled with shared laughter, challenges met together, and the warmth of togetherness. Standing there, she turned to him and felt the current of emotion that danced between them. Words were unnecessary. Their eyes spoke volumes. In that quiet, intimate moment, Clara knew she had rebuilt her cabin log by log, but also found a part of herself she never thought she'd lost. The wind rustled through the leaves, wrapping around them as if celebrating their triumph. As dusk fell once again, she and Jake stood side by side, together at the threshold of the cabin that had waited so long to be reborn. "I couldn't have done this without you," she murmured. "It was your strength that built this," Jake replied, his gaze steady. As they stepped inside the cabin together, Clara felt a surge of hope. Old shadows began to fade away, and in their place rose a bright horizon. She had rebuilt her home and carved a new path with a quiet cowboy at her side. Life had led her to this moment, and she was more than ready to embrace every step forward. The cabin stood firm and strong, full of promise for the future. And within its walls, a new story began, one filled with laughter, love, and the unyielding spirit of two souls united by chance, courage, and the storms they had weathered. The wind howled through the valley, a haunting cry echoing against the mountains. Clara crouched beneath the remains of what once was her cozy cabin, the heart of her world, now reduced to a pile of broken logs and twisted dreams. Just a week ago, she had settled into a life filled with warmth and the soothing sounds of nature. Now a storm had ripped it all away, leaving her feeling raw and vulnerable. In the moments of silence that followed the chaos, she silently grappled with the aftermath. The weight of despair pressed heavy on her chest, but deep inside something stirred, a flicker of determination ignited by loss. She couldn't let this be the end. No, Clara Allen would rebuild, log by log, nail by nail. With a surge of strength, she stood tall, surveying the wreckage. Memories flooded her mind-long nights spent by the fire, laughter wrapping around her like a warm blanket, and mornings where golden light filtered through the trees. This cabin was more than wood and nails. It was where she had begun anew after losing everything else. It had been her refuge. With her heart racing and a fierce resolve coursing through her veins, Clara set to work. There was no time to waste. She snagged the nearest log, her fingers brushing against its rough surface. It felt like a lifeline, an anchor in the storm of uncertainty swirling around her. But as she struggled to lift it, realization slowly crept in. This was bigger than just physical labor. It was a mental challenge, too. Frustration bubbled under the surface as she wrestled with the tree's remnants. She had done this before, had built something from nothing, but this time, the weight of despair made every log feel impossibly heavy. Just when she felt she might cave under the pressure, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. He was tall, clad in denim and a faded flannel shirt. His cowboy hat cast a shadow over his face, making it difficult to see his expression. But there was something solid about him, a quiet strength that pulled her gaze. He led a sturdy horse on a rope, moving with an easy grace that spoke of long hours spent on the trail. He asked, his voice steady, cutting through the howling wind. Clara blinked, startled. The mountains were known for their solitude, not for people. She managed, disbelief lacing her words. "Name's Jake," he responded simply, stepping closer, his eyes calm as they assessed the situation. She hesitated. Asking for help had never come easily to her. Life had taught her to rely solely on herself, to push through every obstacle without leaning on anyone else. But at that moment, with the storm still howling in the distance and the burden of rebuilding heavy upon her heart, she felt a strange pull toward this quiet cowboy. "Yeah, I guess I do," Clara admitted, swallowing her pride. As they began working side by side, something shifted in the air, a connection forged in the quiet moments between labor. Clara marveled at how effortlessly Jake moved, lifting logs with a grace she had never seen. It was as if he understood the rhythm of the land, the dance between man and nature. She asked, her curiosity bubbling up amid the labor. Paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I've been traveling these parts for a while, looking for work where I can find it." "Sure, but you don't have to stay," Clara replied, still wary of accepting help. A hint of a smile flickered across his lips, barely noticeable but real. Everyone could use a little help sometimes. As days turned into weeks, Jake became a fixture in her routine. Together, they picked through the wreckage, salvaging what they could, piecing together the structure that had been a home. It was hard work, both physically and emotionally. But slowly, Clara began to see the cabin rise again, each log signaling a new chapter in her life. In moments of fatigue, when desperation whispered doubt, Jake was there, always steady, urging her to take a breath, to pause. "You're tougher than you think," he often said, as if sensing the storm within her was as fierce as the one that had torn her home apart. Their conversations wandered from dreams to fears, laughter bubbling up between them as they shared stories of their lives. Clara found herself revealing more than she ever intended, her past struggles, her desire to escape the clamor of the city, how she had thought the cabin would shield her from pain. Jake listened, his presence a soothing balm to her shattered heart. "Sometimes, rebuilding means letting go of what was," he said one evening as the sky turned to twilight. She caught his gaze, understanding flickering between them. She had needed to hear that, as if the words had unraveled something tangled deep inside. Clara's journey wasn't just about reconstructing a cabin. It was about reshaping her identity, rising from the ashes of loss. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds swirling ominously against the horizon. Clara felt the familiar lump of panic rise in her throat. "We need to work quickly." Jake's gaze was firm. "We'll make it." His calm demeanor anchored her. They scrambled, hoisting logs and tightening tarps, hearts racing as the winds picked up, making their movements feel urgent and frantic. With each stroke of the hammer, the world around her faded, the chaos of the storm turning into a distant rumble. They were in sync, like a well-rehearsed dance, working to transform the desperate energy around them into perseverance. As rain began to pour, soaking through the fabric of their shirts, Clara felt alive, her spirit ignited by the sheer effort of survival. They laughed as they struggled together, raw and wild, the storm outside only a backdrop against the building heat between them. After the storm passed, they sat on the porch of the half-constructed cabin, both panting, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The gray sky cleared, leaving behind a breathtaking rainbow arching over the valley. Clara leaned back, allowing the tension of the past weeks to wash away, revealing a sense of safety she hadn't known she was missing. "I didn't think I could do this without you," she confessed, glancing sideways at Jake, who was still looking at the rainbow with quiet contentment. "You'd have found a way," he replied, finally turning to meet her gaze. "You've got fire, Clara." His words hung in the air like a promise, igniting something deep inside her. In the safety of that moment, their barriers crumbled. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't merely rebuilding her cabin, but also forging a connection that was both unexpected and profound. With each passing day, their bond deepened, entwining them in ways neither had anticipated. Even as they worked, Clara sought moments where she could witness Jake's quiet strength. The way he moved with purpose was almost meditative, a stark contrast to her own mental whirlwind. She often caught herself watching him, not just as a helper, but as a man who might redefine her understanding of companionship. There was no grand gesture, no fireworks, just a growing closeness that felt as natural as breathing. One evening, with the sun dipping low, casting a golden hue across the landscape, Clara handed Jake a flask of hot cocoa. Their fingers brushed briefly, igniting a spark that sent a jolt through her. A moment hung heavy in the air, a realization trembling just beneath the surface. As she watched him sip, contemplating the warm drink, she dared to voice the thought that fluttered uninvited in her mind. "What happens after this, after we finish rebuilding?" He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Honestly, I don't know. I don't have a home in the traditional sense." Silence followed, thick with unspoken words. Clara's heart thudded as she began to grasp the weight of what he was saying. His journey was one of seeking, much like her own. What if, she started, hesitating at the precipice of vulnerability? What if after the cabin we explore together? Jake's gaze softened as he processed her words. "Then we'll explore together. You're stronger than you know, Clara." With those words, something shifted between them, a bond deepening, solidifying into something lasting. They were two wanderers rediscovering joy amidst the wreckage of what had been. The final touches on the cabin came together, sunlight glancing off the polished logs, a celebratory warmth as the last nail was hammered in. Clara stepped back, her breath catching as she took in the structure, a fortress of hope, the walls standing tall against the sky. "This is it," she breathed, overwhelmed with emotion. The cabin was a manifestation of the journey she had taken with Jake, each log a testament to their struggles and triumphs. Jake stepped beside her, a proud smile gracing his features. "You built this, Clara." In that moment, she realized it was more than just a cabin. It was a symbol of resilience, of openness, of allowing herself to embrace help and companionship. It was the beginning of something new, something uncharted. As dusk descended, they sat side by side on the porch, the stars twinkling above like a blanket of dreams waiting to be fulfilled. Jake's shoulder brushed against hers, a gentle reminder of the bond they had forged. "Thanks for being here with me," she said quietly, glancing at him. Jake turned to her, the warmth in his eyes matching the glimmer of stars. "You're worth it, Clara." And as they sat in that tranquil night, the echoes of laughter and shared stories swirled around them. Clara felt a peace settle in her heart, warm and inviting. She had rebuilt her cabin, and in doing so, she had also crafted a life richer than she had ever dreamed. Side by side with the quiet cowboy, she was ready to face whatever came next. With a future full of possibilities stretching out before them, she felt alive, ready for the adventures that awaited together. The thunder rolled like a distant drum, shaking the very earth beneath Clara's feet. It was just another stormy night in the mountains, but this time it felt different, menacing. And then came the crack sharp, sudden like the sound of a heart breaking. Clara's eyes flew to the window just in time to see a massive bolt of lightning strike her cabin, the blaze of light illuminating the pines surrounding her. When the brightness dissipated, the cabin stood silent for just a heartbeat. But then, the old wood creaked ominously, and a rush of wind pushed against the door. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "No, not now," she whispered, feeling panic grip her heart. The storm raged outside, wind howling like a wild animal searching for prey. Clara darted outside, heart pounding, as rain began to pour in earnest. She watched in horror as her beloved cabin swayed dangerously, finally yielding to the fury of nature. In one terrible moment, a wall crumbled like a house of cards, sending debris crashing to the ground. Tremors of fear shot through her, but underneath, a flicker of something else stirred a deep resilience that refused to be snuffed out. She couldn't let this be the end. With the storm swirling around her, Clara took a deep breath and made a decision. She would rebuild. As dawn broke, Clara stood in the aftermath, surrounded by shattered wood and memories. Her heart ached as she surveyed the wreckage. How could she take the first step toward rebuilding her life, her sanctuary? Each log represented not just a piece of material, but the laughter, love, and warmth that had once filled those walls. With the remnants of the storm still clinging to her, Clara knelt beside a broken log, running her fingers over the splintered surface. She Googled how to rebuild a cabin on her phone, but her hands shook. The magnitude of the task loomed large and her chest tightened. And just when she thought about giving up, she noticed movement in the distance. A figure emerged from the trees, tall and steady. As he drew closer, Clara saw he wore a cowboy hat pulled low over his brow and jeans caked with mud from the trail. It was almost as if Southern folklore had brought him to life. The cowboy approached slowly, moving like he belonged to the very earth beneath their feet. He asked, his voice deep and calm, the storm's echoes still rumbling in the background. Clara's first instinct was to wave him off. "I can manage," she said, forcing a smile. She didn't want to seem weak, but as she stood there, the enormity of the task loomed before her. It was more than just rebuilding a cabin, it was about reclaiming her life. "I'm Jake," he said, offering a warm, genuine smile. Feeling a surprising rush of gratitude, Clara nodded. "I'm Clara." Working together, they picked through the debris, salvaging what little they could. The quiet cowboy moved with a grace that belied his muscular frame, lifting heavy logs effortlessly. Clara found herself drawn to his silent strength, each movement steady and sure. With every log they hoisted, memories flooded back. Sunday mornings sipping coffee, evenings spent in the glow of the fireplace, the laughter that echoed off the walls. The memories stirred something in Clara, igniting a flame of determination deep within her. She couldn't just rebuild the cabin, she needed to reclaim the life she lost. Clara asked as they cleared away twisted pieces of wood. Jake shrugged slightly, still focusing on the task at hand. "Grew up on a ranch. You learn to fix things when you're surrounded by nature." The ease with which he responded made her smile. "I wish I had your skills." He glanced at her, his eyes a soft brown under the wide brim of his hat. "It's all about taking your time." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara reflected on his words. She hadn't just lost her home, she had lost her sense of purpose. Little by little, she was learning to find it again. Weeks passed, and slowly, the cabin re-emerged, stronger and more defined with each passing day. The rhythm of their work became a sort of dance, Clara finding strength in their partnership. As they nailed logs in place, she found herself telling him stories of her life. The heartbreaks, the joys, the complicated threads that had woven her journey. Jake listened, nodding, offering encouragement, and occasionally sharing his own stories of long nights on the ranch and summer days in the open plains. There was warmth in the way he spoke, a kind of honesty that made her feel like she was seen for who she really was. But Clara often caught herself wrestling with another kind of vulnerability. The more she opened up, the more she felt drawn to him, and the fear of that connection scared her. What if she opened her heart only to have it torn down again? One stormy afternoon, as they worked to reinforce a wall, a clap of thunder roared overhead. Clara's heart raced with the sudden swell of panic. What if? She blurted out, fear clawing at her throat. Jake paused, setting down his tools. "Hey, look at me," he said gently, stepping closer so that their eyes locked. "We're building it back stronger. It's not just about the logs, it's about what you put into it. Trust the process." Her breath caught in her throat, and in that moment she saw the truth in his words. It was about courage, not just to rebuild physically, but to let go of the past, to trust herself again, to trust him. As the days wore on, their bond tightened. Laughter became a fixture in their work, the sounds intertwining like the grains of wood they were hammering together. Clara found herself inviting Jake for meals shared by the flickering light of fireflies and the evening stars. Together, they made memories that felt like balm for old wounds. One night, as they sat outside with mugs of cocoa warming their hands, Clara turned to him, testing the fragile waters. "Jake." He paused, brow furrowing, looking thoughtful as he stirred the depths of his memory. "Home. It's not just a place. It's a feeling, it's connection and trust." The weight of his words resonated deep within her. Clara realized he was not just helping her rebuild a cabin, he was helping her redefine what home truly meant. Finally, they reached a pivotal moment, the nearing completion of the cabin. One breathtaking sunset, Clara stood at the door, heart swelling as her fingers grazed the fresh wood. The structure held not just nails and logs, but laughter, challenges overcome, and a burgeoning hope for the future. She felt Jake stand beside her, quiet and steady as always. "You did this, Clara. Log by log, life by life. You turned a storm into a sanctuary." Turning to face him, Clara was overwhelmingly struck by the depth of her gratitude. "But I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. The vulnerability in her voice startled her. Jake smiled, a warmth that radiated through the cool air, filling the space between them. "We did this together." In that moment, the air crackled, and Clara felt a shift, something blossoming in the silence shared. The connection they had built through shared stories and hard work carried a weight that felt undeniable. A few days later, on a perfect sunlit afternoon, they stood amidst their creation, the cabin seeming to glow against the azure sky. It felt like a celebration, but Clara could feel the tide of change shifting. She asked, the eagerness rising in her voice. Nodding, Jake pushed the door open slowly, both stepping into the heart of her dreams. The space felt radiant, filled with the spirit of the memories crafted together. She could envision furniture in the corners, laughter echoing against the walls, warmth wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. "Let's make it even cozier," Clara said with determination. Jake laughed, the sound rich and infectious. "I can help with that." As they stood side by side, Clara felt the realization settle in her soul. She was not just rebuilding a cabin, she was rebuilding herself. It was more than just timber and nails. It was a future filled with promise. But even as hope thrummed in her heart, fear crept in. What would happen next? What if he rode off into another adventure? That night, as they shared stories and laughter under the twinkling stars, Clara found the courage to voice her uncertainty. "What happens after this?" Jake looked thoughtful, his gaze distant yet focused on her. "I think it's just the beginning, Clara. You're stronger than you know." There was something charged in the air, a promise waiting to unfurl. Clara felt herself take a breath, mind racing with the possibilities that were quietly blooming between them. As the last piece of the cabin fell into place, the celebration began. Clara felt proud, the completion of her journey, hers and Jake's intertwined. Friends and neighbors from the area joined, filling the small space with laughter, voices, and joy. In that moment, surrounded by the people she cared about and the cowboy who had helped her reclaim her life, Clara took a deep breath and drew strength from it all. She had faced storms and emerged stronger. She had rebuilt her sanctuary, and along the way, she had built connections that nourished her soul. As the sun set, illuminating their faces in a warm glow, Clara recognized something profound. It wasn't just about the cabin. It was about the journey of opening her heart, allowing a quiet cowboy to walk alongside her, helping in ways she never thought she needed. And beneath the vast, starry sky, they looked to the horizon, embracing whatever lay ahead together. The lightning split the sky like a jagged sword, illuminating Clara's cabin for a fleeting second before darkness swallowed it whole. She stood frozen at the window, heart racing as she watched the storm gather strength. She had loved this cabin. It was her sanctuary, her escape from the chaos of life. But standing there, she felt something else too, an unsettling anxiety that clawed at her mind. With a sudden crash, the cabin's roof groaned, surrendering to the storm. An ominous creak turned into fragments flying through the air like shattered dreams. Clara gasped, her breath hitching as the world outside blurred through raindrops streaking on the glass. This was not just a storm, it was a reckoning, a ferocious reminder of everything she tried to escape. Her heart thumped as if echoing the chaos outside. Clara stumbled back, but a fierce resolve bloomed inside her chest. She couldn't let this cabin be reduced to splinters and memories. No, she would rebuild it, log by log, even if she had to face the storm itself. As dawn broke, the once proud cabin lay in ruins, the surrounding trees silent witnesses to the tragedy. Clara stepped outside, rain-soaked and torn, staring at the devastation before her. She felt an ache in her chest, but amidst that pain, a determination blazed. She couldn't just walk away. Not now, not ever. But where to begin? She knelt down, sifting through debris, fingers trembling as they traced the rough edges of the splintered logs. They weren't just pieces of wood. They were memories, fragments of a life lived fully, of laughter shared with friends and solace found in solitude. To rebuild would mean to reclaim herself. That first day, Clara felt like a soldier facing a battlefield. She dragged heavy logs, her muscles crying out, each movement a testament to her will. As exhaustion threatened to drown her spirit, she stumbled upon an old toolbox half buried under a pile of rubble. It seemed almost like fate calling to her. Then, just as she was about to give in to despair, she noticed a figure moving up the path. A tall man rode slowly on horseback, his silhouette strong and unwavering against the dark forest. He wore a worn-out cowboy hat, casting a shadow over his rugged features. Clara squinted, wondering if he was an illusion made real by her desperation. As he approached, the man dismounted with a deliberate grace. He asked, his voice calm but deep, like the steady beat of a drum. Clara hesitated, pride gripping her. "I can do this myself," she replied, trying to muster some strength, but the weariness in her bones betrayed her. "You don't have to," he countered softly, stepping closer, his eyes filled with understanding. "I'm Jake." The sincerity in his voice softened her walls. "Clara," she said, finally giving a small nod. From that moment, the rhythm of their work began to create a new harmony. They sorted through the debris, dragging logs back to the skeletal remains of the cabin, piecing it together again. Each time Clara felt overwhelmed, Jake was right there, steady and ready to lend an arm. It was as if he provided not just physical support, but reassurance that she could once again have something solid beneath her feet. Clara asked one afternoon as they took a break, wiping sweat from their brows. Jake glanced upwards as if contemplating how much to reveal. "I've been traveling for a while. I like the solitude of the mountains." She smiled, realizing they were both searching for something, be it peace, purpose, or a place to call home. "You've helped me more than you know," she admitted, allowing a flicker of vulnerability to slip through. As days turned into weeks, the cabin transformed before their eyes. Clara watched in awe as the walls began to take shape, each log representing her grit, her determination to rise from the ashes of sorrow. The cabin felt like a living entity, absorbing each ounce of effort she poured into it. With every nail driven, Clara felt stronger, not just physically but emotionally. She was reclaiming her identity, inch by inch. Yet beneath the surface, a different kind of tension flickered like firelight. Clara found herself drawn to Jake, captivated by the strength he radiated. Maybe it was the way he could silence her storms of doubt with a glance, or the calm assurance he brought to her chaotic world. One evening, as they sat atop a stack of neatly arranged logs watching the sunset paint the sky, Clara turned to him. She asked, curiosity bubbling up. Jake took a moment, staring into the fiery horizon. "Home is where you feel safe." With those words, a pang of longing resonated deep within her. She had built this cabin to escape loneliness, yet now she feared the prospect of facing the world without him beside her. She asked cautiously, the question hanging heavy in the air. He glanced at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't know. I wander, but there's something about this place." Her heart raced as uncertainty filled the space between them. They were in different worlds, but the bond they were forging felt like a bridge strong enough to traverse any chasm. As the weeks rolled on, the cabin neared completion, drawing curious glances from passing hikers and neighbors. Each corner they finished bore witness to the laughter and more profound conversations they shared. It felt like they were not just building a house, but crafting a life full of magic. But with the rise of the cabin came the rise of her feelings for Jake, a powerful current pulling her closer to him, yet equally frightening. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled in the distance, Clara found herself sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, heart racing. Jake wandered over, his expression softening as he spotted her. Clara hesitated, searching for the right words. Just wondering what happens next. His eyes darkened, a reflection of thoughts that mirrored her own. "I guess that depends on you. This is just a chapter, Clara." Every word he spoke sounded like an invitation to explore the possibilities, yet fear still lurked, threatening to keep her rooted in the safety of her solitude. With one final push, they finished the cabin on a bright sunny day, the air fresh with anticipation. Clara stepped back, taking in the full beauty of what they had created together. The cabin stood proud against the mountains, nothing short of a triumph over adversity. Jake joined her, both surveying their handiwork. "You did this, Clara." Her breath caught as she turned to him. It was more than just a structure they had raised. It was hope, resilience, and connection. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jake." The moment hung thick, charged with unspoken emotions. Clara took a cautious step closer, the space between them closing in anticipation. "I guess what I'm trying to say is, I want you to stay." He studied her, the weight of her vulnerability lighting a spark of understanding in his eyes. "You're not alone in this," he murmured, his voice low and earnest. "You've taught me something about home too. It's about connection." They stood there, the world around them fading into nothing, an electric tension weaving through the air. Just then, a soft breeze stirred, almost like a whisper of encouragement from nature itself. Jake took a step forward, closing the remaining distance. In that moment, Clara felt something release inside her, a surge of warmth as he cupped her face gently in his hands, drawing her closer. Their lips met softly, a silent promise born from shared dreams and newfound hope. The kiss was tender yet powerful, a connection forged through heartache and healing. As they pulled apart, Clara felt empowered, liberated from the fears that had once held her captive. Underneath hidden layers of longing, they had found freedom in one another. Stepping back into the cabin, they reveled in the overwhelming sense of accomplishment and belonging. It wasn't just about the place. It was about the journey they shared, the vulnerability they had embraced together. Clara had rebuilt her cabin, and in doing so, she had woven her heart into it, brought to life by the quiet cowboy who stood beside her. When the first winter storm blew in, a thin layer of snow settled over the cabin, transforming it into a postcard of tranquility. Huddled inside with a fire crackling warmly, they celebrated the new beginning they had created together. Outside, the world rested under a blanket of white, while inside, love blossomed and hope flourished. Clara looked over at Jake, who wore that familiar, gentle smile. Here in this cozy shelter, they had forged something powerful. It wasn't just a cabin, it was a testament to resilience, a haven full of dreams and the promise of tomorrow. In the quiet hush of the night, Clara nestled against Jake, warmth flooding her soul. Together, they were more than survivors of their respective storms. They were architects of something beautiful, built log by log. And in that quiet moment, she knew their story was far from over. It was just beginning. The storm hit with a ferocity Clara hadn't seen before, twisting through the forest like an angry beast. Thunder rolled in waves, crashing against the mountains and awakening a primal fear in her heart. She had always loved storms, their wild energy making her feel alive. But this was different. The cabin, once her sanctuary, now felt like it could collapse any moment. With a beating heart, Clara rushed to the windows, watching as the sky darkened to an inky black. Raindrops pounded the roof, a relentless tattoo drowning out any hope of calm. The trees bent under the force of the wind, and with a sudden crash, a loud snap cut through the chaos. She stepped back, fear settling in the pit of her stomach. Her beloved cabin had stood for years, but now it felt fragile, like an old woman worn down by time. Then, just as she braced for the worst, a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated her cabin like a spotlight. In that instant, she saw everything clearly. A single beam from the heavens, revealing the cracks in the wall, the uneven planks of wood that had weathered too many storms. Clara's breath caught in her throat, and in that single moment the reality hit her. When the storm finally quieted, Clara stood in the aftermath, drenched and shaken. The floor was soaked, and the very walls seemed to moan under the weight of the storm. She stepped outside to survey the damage, a cold wind biting at her skin. The cabin was more than a structure. It was her sanctuary, a refuge from the world and her past. It had seen her laughter and tears, but today it lay in ruins. But standing there, surrounded by shattered dreams, Clara felt something shift inside her. This was not the end. No, she was determined to rebuild log by log. Days turned into a blur of gray skies and tireless work. Clara dug through debris, pulling out torn pieces of wood, each one a memory drenched in rain. The scent of wet earth filled the air as she threw herself into the task. With each log she dragged, with every nail she drove into place, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. But rebuilding alone was harder than she had envisioned. Her muscles ached, her hands blistered, and doubt crept in despite her resolve. Just when she felt the weight of hopelessness pulling her down, she caught a glimpse of movement along the path. A figure emerged, steady and measured, cutting through the mist. It was a tall cowboy dressed in denim and a faded flannel shirt, leading a sturdy horse that trotted close behind him. He called, his voice calm and deep, cutting through the remnants of the storm like a beacon. Clara hesitated, eyeing him suspiciously. "I'm fine," she replied, though she could hear the crack in her own voice. He took a step closer, his demeanor steady and reassuring. "You don't look fine." She felt the tension in her chest loosen just a touch. "I can do this," she insisted, but the words felt hollow. The cowboy nodded slowly. "I'm Jake, I can help." With relief nudging her pride aside, Clara nodded. "Okay." As they began to work together, Jake's quiet strength was like a balm over her frayed nerves. He moved with a grace that felt effortless, lifting logs and hammering nails as if he had done it 1,000 times before. Each time she stumbled, he was right there, steadying her, reminding her to breathe and keep pushing forward. Clara asked one afternoon, curiosity sparkling in the hint of clouds overhead. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "I like these mountains. They've been good to me." The sincerity in his response quelled the lingering doubts in Clara's mind. It was refreshing to feel supported, to let go of the heavy burden of solitude she had carried for so long. As the days passed, the cabin began to take shape again. They stacked logs with precision, finding a rhythm to their work. But it was more than just physical labor. It felt like they were building something deeper, a bond formed through shared effort and unspoken understanding. With the sun warming their backs, Clara started sharing stories, memories of her childhood dreams, of the reasons she had chosen this secluded life in the mountains. Jake listened intently, offering gentle encouragement. Each story she shared felt like a step closer to healing the wounds of her past. She finally asked one evening, the shadows stretching long as the sun dipped below the horizon. His eyes flickered with memories. "Just wandering, I guess. I've never quite settled down." Clara nodded, feeling the weight of his unspoken truths in her heart. They were two souls intertwined by circumstance, both seeking refuge from storms, just in different ways. As the cabin neared completion, Clara felt a swelling pride in her chest. She was reclaiming her life piece by piece, but lurking beneath her joys was an unsettling fear. What would happen once the cabin was finished? Would Jake leave, like so many others had done before him? The thought dug deep, like a thorn in her heart. One quiet evening, as they sat on the porch, the sky painted with stars, Clara finally spoke up. She asked, voice laced with uncertainty. Jake turned to her, the soft glow of firelight reflecting in his eyes. "That's up to you, Clara." Clara felt a lump rise in her throat. He studied her, his expression a blend of empathy and something unspoken. "You don't have to be, I'm here." That moment felt charged, the air thick with unspoken possibility. She could feel the warmth between them, the connection growing in ways that terrified her. But still, there was a tantalizing hint of hope. As the final touches were made on the cabin, Clara felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. She had faced storms and emerged stronger. Together, they had built something beautiful, much more than just walls and rafters. It was a testament to connection, resilience, and newfound hope. When the last log was set into place, Clara stood back and marveled at what they had created. The cabin rose proud against the backdrop of the mountains, a vibrant sanctuary once again. It wasn't just their handiwork, it felt like a reflection of each of them. "Look at it," Clara breathed, the weight of her emotions spilling forth. Jake stepped beside her, glancing at the structure that now glimmered in the twilight. "You built this, Clara." She turned to him with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, an unspoken longing blooming in her heart. "And I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted, vulnerability seeping into her voice. Jake nodded, a warmth in his expression that made her heart race. Underneath the score of chirping crickets and soft moments, something shifted. Clara realized that she wanted more than just partnership in labor. She craved connection, intimacy, a shared life. That night, the stars illuminated the cabin like a promise waiting to unfold. As Clara stood with Jake on the porch, she felt a surge of possibility. What if this was more than just a moment? What if they could be a part of each other's lives beyond these walls? One evening, Clara took a deep breath as they watched the sunset together, colors bending and swirling in the sky. "Jake, if you wanted to stay, I'd want that," she said, her voice steady but tender. His gaze shifted to meet hers, the weight of the world momentarily forgot. "I was hoping for the same." In that instant, a current flowed between them, a silent agreement that they would explore what lay ahead together. It was terrifying yet exhilarating. They had both rebuilt something more significant than just the cabin. They had started to stitch their lives into one another. As summer melted into fall, the cabin became a home. Laughter echoed off the walls, the scent of fresh bread wafted in the air. Clara found joy in the everyday moments, sharing meals, stories, and quiet evenings beneath the blanket of stars. Jake's presence felt comforting, grounding amidst the changes in her life. He became her partner in every sense, helping her not just build a cabin, but to create a life woven with intention. But as winter approached, a storm brewed in the distance, a reminder of the past. Clara felt a familiar wave of anxiety crash over her. Would Jake still be there in the winter? Would the warmth they forged turn cold? One evening, as they huddled around the fire, Clara broke the silence that hung heavy with uncertainty. She asked, her tone tinged with worry. Jake leaned closer, his hand finding hers, the warmth spreading like a soothing balm. "We've got this. Whatever comes, we face it together." In those words, Clara found solace. As the first flakes of snow began to fall, she recalled the storm that had threatened to tear her world apart. But now, standing beside Jake, she felt a different kind of strength. The winter was hard, but within the cabin, a sanctuary had blossomed. They shared dreams, fears, and late-night chats over steaming mugs of cocoa. Together, they had cultivated something resilient, something that felt like home. One night, Clara awoke to the sound of the howling winds outside. She turned to see Jake peacefully asleep beside her, his presence warm and grounding. In that moment, she knew she had made the right choice. It wasn't just about rebuilding a cabin. It was about investing in love, trust, and vulnerability. As spring approached, the world outside began to bloom once more. Both Clara and Jake had weathered countless storms, and with the promise of new life, they felt ready to take on whatever came next together. Standing on the porch of their cabin, under a sky painted with gold and blue, Clara turned to Jake. "I wouldn't change a thing," she said, her voice steady and warm. He smiled, his eyes sparkling with sincerity as he took her hand. "Neither would I," and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the cabin, Clara understood that she had not only rebuilt her home, but had also built a life worth living, solid, strong, and filled with love. Together, they had crafted a shelter that would withstand any storm, a reminder that even in the fiercest winds, hope flourishes and dreams can take root again. A blinding flash of lightning illuminated the mountain sky, the crack of thunder roaring like a beast awakening from slumber. Clara stood frozen in her cabin, heart pounding, watching as the storm gathered strength outside. The trees swayed and bent, a wild dance in tune with nature's fury. But it wasn't the storm that sent shivers down her spine, it was the cabin, her sanctuary, quaking under the relentless assault of the wind and rain. Just last week, this cabin had been her safe haven, a refuge from life's chaos. A place filled with laughter, cozy fires, and the sweet scent of pine. Now, it felt like the walls were closing in, threatening to crumble around her. Clara brushed a trembling hand across the window, catching sight of the shadows flitting about in the growing darkness. Would her home survive the night? The first tree fell with a resounding crash that echoed off the hills, shaking her to her core. Clara turned away from the window as her heart sank. She needed to do something. She couldn't just stand here and let the storm take everything from her. With determination ignited in her chest, Clara grabbed her rain gear and stumbled out into the tempest. Rain pelted her face, blinding her as the wind howled like a pack of wolves. She squinted through the downpour, rushing to the side of her cabin. The earth was slick and treacherous beneath her feet, but she didn't care. She had worked too hard to let it all wash away. As she dug through fallen branches and debris, she heard another crash behind her, followed by a sickening creak. Clara's heart raced as she spun around just in time to see the side of her cabin give way. She watched helplessly as the logs splintered and fell, the very walls of her home collapsing as if they were nothing more than kindling. Panic threatened to engulf her, but then something caught her eye, a figure appearing through the swirling rain. A tall man, clad in a weathered cowboy hat and soaked in mud, rode into view on horseback. It was as if he had come straight from a storybook, a beacon of hope amid chaos. He shouted, his voice steady amid the storm. Clara felt both fear and relief surge within her. She yelled back, unsure if he could hear her over the storm's fury. He called as he dismounted and moved toward her, muscles working with ease against the raging winds. She watched in disbelief as he approached the collapsing structure, unafraid. With every crashing wave of rain, he moved closer, and as the wind howled, something in his presence steadied her. She had been so consumed by fear that she hadn't noticed the power of a helping hand. Clara took a breath, letting the storm rally around her. He might just be the ally she needed. "Take cover," he shouted, and in that moment he seemed unfazed by the chaos. He was a quiet force of nature, grounded and unwavering. Clara felt her instincts shift. Maybe it was okay to lean on someone else just this once. Hours passed and the storm finally began to ease, but not before doing its damage. The cabin lay gutted, debris scattered like fallen leaves, but among the wreckage, Clara felt something stirring inside her, determination mixed with fear and a flicker of hope. "Let's get started," the cowboy said, his voice calm and grounded like the mountains surrounding them. Slowly, Clara began gathering her wits as they worked together among the ruins. As they dug through the wreckage, she learned his name was Jake. He moved fluidly, pulling logs from the mashed heap, not a single word wasted. Clara asked him amidst the chaos, curiosity bubbling up despite her shock. "Because everyone deserves a home," he replied, not breaking stride as he cleared away a mangled piece of timber. As the sun broke through heavy clouds, a glowing warmth filled the air, illuminating the devastation around them. The cabin, once a proud structure, stood sadly askew, but together they would reclaim it. Days turned into a blur of hard work, sweat, and shared stories. Jake taught Clara how to lift logs and hammer nails, but more importantly, he taught her to believe she could rebuild what had been lost. With each log they placed, Clara began to reclaim her life more than just a structure. It was a way of saying she wouldn't be defeated. In those quiet moments as they hammered away, they found laughter. They shared meals by candlelight, wild stories of their pasts and dreams of their futures. They were kindred spirits forging a bond through the fire of shared challenges. Through the hard labor, Clara began to see Jake not just as a helper, but as a friend. One evening, as they prepared to finish laying the last logs in the wall, Clara caught herself stealing glances at him. The way he focused so intently, muscles flexing with every movement, made her heart race. There was a quiet strength about him that drew her in, stitching the fabric of their partnership with something more profound. Jake asked as they took a much-needed break, wiping sweat from their brows. "I guess I'll keep doing this, building my life and my home," she said softly, uncertainly. He looked at her intently, the sun casting shadows on his rugged face. "You don't have to." Her chest tightened at those words. She had spent so long thinking of herself as someone who could only be alone. But maybe, just maybe, leaning on someone else was okay. Would that make her weak? Or could it be the strength she didn't realize she'd lost? A sudden flicker of vulnerability opened between them in the warm light, shifting the dynamics of their companionship. But fear crept in again. Would he leave when the work was done? As they finally finished the cabin, Clara stepped back and surveyed her handiwork, a surge of pride flooding her chest. It stood tall and sturdy, a fortress against the elements. She had reclaimed something, the heart of her home, and with it a piece of herself that she thought was lost. Jake joined her, eyes scanning the cabin. "You did this, Clara." She looked up at him, emotions swirling in her heart. In that moment, as she stood beside him, she felt the world fade away. The connection between them intensified, stronger than the force of nature that had once threatened to tear her apart. Through laughter and silence, they had forged something new, a bond that navigated between friendship and something yet undefined. Just as Clara thought to take a step closer, Jake broke the spell. His voice was earnest, the gravity of their labor palpable. That night, as a blanket of stars unfolded above them, Clara reminisced about the journey of storms weathered and strength regained. She finally understood that rebuilding her cabin was only part of her journey. She had also rebuilt trust, first in herself and then in him. But a deep-rooted fear still lingered. What would happen to their connection once the cabin stood completed? Just as she gathered her courage to ask, Jake spoke up again. "Clara, I'm not going anywhere. I want to be here." Her heart soared as his words wrapped around her like a warm embrace. With a reassuring smile, he nodded. "You're not alone anymore." As the last rays of summer faded into the crispness of fall, Clara began to allow her heart to open, to trust again. Together, they settled into their lives within the sturdy embrace of the cabin. The days were filled with laughter, late-night talks, and moments of quiet reflection. Clara even began to envision a future, one that included not just herself, but Jake too, creating their lives together beneath the mountain skies. One night as they sat around the fire, Clara thought about how far they had come. She turned to Jake, her heart full. "I never thought I'd feel at home again." He smiled softly, his eyes reflecting the flames. "You found your way yourself." In that moment, Clara knew they were building more than a life together. They were constructing a foundation built on trust, support, and a willingness to open their hearts. Hand in hand, they forged a path through the uncertainties, anchoring themselves in love and companionship. As winter approached, a veil of snow blanketed the cabin, making it look much like a picture from a storybook. The air felt electric, full of possibilities, warmth, and dreams waiting to unfurl. Clara found herself feeling lighter, as if she could conquer anything. When the first snowflakes began to dance through the air, Clara and Jake bundled up in layers, ready to brave the cold. They ventured out, laughter mingling with the crisp air as they carved paths through the snow. With each snowfall, Clara felt the cabin thriving around them, filled with warmth and love. It had become a home, a place where laughter echoed and memories were made. They built a world together, finding joy in even the simplest moments, a seemingly unending dance that propelled them into a future bright with promise. On a particularly chilly night, as they warmed by the fire, Clara turned to Jake, something deep tugging at her heart. "You know, I never would have imagined being this happy." Jake's smile widened as he pulled her closer, her heartbeat steadying against his side. "You created this happiness, Clara." As the flames flickered, Clara's heart swelled. This was no longer just a cabin or a rebuilding of the past. It was the journey of two souls intertwining, navigating the world hand in hand, overcoming storms, both literal and metaphorical together. And as they sat cozied up against the backdrop of the crackling fire, Clara realized that she had found much more than just a cowboy to help her rebuild. She had found a partner, a companion who would stand by her side through life's challenges, forging ahead into a future that shimmered with newfound hope. They had built this life log by log, and it was beautiful, exactly what she had always dreamed of. Through the storms, they had planted roots, and together they would grow. The thunder rolled like a distant drumbeat, shaking Clara to her core. Outside her cabin, dark clouds gathered, swirling ominously against the sky. She stood frozen at the window, heart racing, as a gust of wind rattled the glass. Just days before, she had reveled in the serenity of her mountain home, a sanctuary from the chaos of the world. Now the storm loomed like a dark omen. A sudden flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the trees that bent and swayed like frantic dancers, and she could feel a prick of fear crawl up her spine. "Not now," she whispered, panic clawing at her throat. She had worked too hard to create this space, to build a life away from everything she had left behind. The cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was her escape, her fortress, the place she dreamed of when life felt overwhelming. The first drops of rain began to fall, softly at first, but then quickly transformed into a torrential downpour that hammered against the roof. Clara instinctively turned away, her breath quickening as she stepped back from the window. The walls of her cabin felt like they were closing in, and she knew she had to act fast. She grabbed a flashlight and dashed outside, the icy rain hitting her like 1,000 tiny needles. Panic threatened to grip her as she surveyed the landscape, searching for any signs of damage. The once sturdy trees groaned under the weight of the storm, branches snapping like dry twigs. Clara's heart raced, her thoughts spiraling into a cascade of what-ifs. Suddenly, there was a deafening crack. A massive tree fell, crashing into the side of her cabin. Clara's stomach sank as she watched the wood splinter and the roof sag under the force of the impact. Desperation surged within her, a primal urge to protect her home, her heart. But just as hopelessness began to creep in, she noticed movement down the path. A figure appeared through the sheets of rain, tall and steady, riding a horse that moved with a graceful familiarity over the uneven terrain. Clara squinted, heart pounding as the stranger drew near, dark against the stormy backdrop. The voice called out deep and calm. Clara could barely see the man's face through the pouring rain, but something about his presence felt like a lifeline. She shouted back, unsure if she could trust this stranger. "Jake," he replied simply. "I saw your cabin take a hit." Clara hesitated, pride making her want to refuse, want to say she could handle this alone. But the fear ate at her, and she felt a rush of relief at the thought of companionship in this chaos. "Okay," she finally replied. Together, they sprinted back toward the cabin, dodging fallen branches and clumps of mud. As they reached the entrance, Jake stepped inside, eyes scanning the interior with a practiced gaze. Clara quickly followed, her heart sinking at the sight. The walls were damaged, the floor soaked. It felt like her spirit was crumbling along with the logs surrounding her. "I'll help you assess the damage," Jake said, his voice steady and reassuring, a solid anchor amidst her storm. Hours passed as they worked side by side, piecing together what remained of her home. Jake's movements were fluid, efficient, and Clara couldn't help but admire his quiet confidence. She felt a flicker of hope each time they salvaged a piece of wood, every log lifted, grounding her more firmly in the moment. Yet beneath that flicker lurked a haunting thought. What if he helped and then vanished, like so many others had done? Clara ventured, trying to coax bits of his story from him as they worked. "Just a traveler for now," he replied, not breaking stride as he lifted a beam. She studied him as he spoke, those words resonating deep within her. She had been that way, too lost and searching. "You seem good at fixing things," she said lightly, hoping to coax a smile from him. "Depends on the situation," he said with a faint grin, "but I like helping when I can." As they continued, Clara found herself drawn to Jake's calm demeanor, the way he focused entirely on the task at hand. It was something she admired. It reminded her of the force with which she had approached building this cabin in the first place. But with each swing of the hammer, she couldn't help the lingering fear twisting in her stomach. Was he only here for the moment? For the chaos? What if he decided to move on once the storm passed? As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the cabin, they paused to catch their breath. "Thank you for being here," Clara said, sincerity pouring from her. "I think you could," Jake replied, catching her gaze. A silence settled between them, thick with unspoken words. Clara's heart raced. She felt a connection growing, the kind that whispered of something deeper, something she hadn't dared to hope for. Maybe it was okay to lean on someone else. The days that followed were filled with the rhythm of hard work, laughter, and the occasional shared meal. They patched the roof, reinforced the walls, and as Clara added log by log, it felt less like rebuilding a cabin and more like constructing a new version of herself. The weight of the past began to lift as she embraced the present and the warm moments she shared with Jake. One evening, as they elevated the last beam, Clara took a step back to admire their work, the cabin now adorned with fresh logs that shimmered in the fading light. She turned to Jake, who stood beside her, sweat glistening on his brow. She exclaimed, a smile breaking across her face. "You did it," he replied, a softness in his voice. Happiness swelled in Clara's chest, but alongside it came a twinge of sadness, a whisper of doubt. She asked, heart racing. Jake met her gaze, and in that moment the connection between them felt electric. The warmth of his words wrapped around her like a blanket, but Clara felt fear creep in. She had fought so hard to reclaim her sense of self, but how could she not let him leave? What would she do then? But even as doubt swirled in her mind, the bond they had formed rooted her where she stood. It was unprecedented. A quiet cowboy who had entered her life amidst chaos and begun to fill the empty spaces in her heart. As winter approached, the cabin stood proud against a backdrop of snow-dusted trees. The two forged ahead, crafting a rhythm of companionship in their daily lives. Together, they learned to share cooking duties, their laughter echoing off the walls. Clara felt more at home than she had in years, and she relished each evening spent wrapped in warmth with Jake. Yet, as the days shortened and darkness settled in earlier, a flicker of fear at the prospect of winter set in. Would the warmth between them endure, or would it wane like the light? One evening, as they sat before the crackling fire, Clara mustered her courage. What if the storm comes back? Jake turned toward her, sincerity etching his face. You won't. This time, you have a choice. You created a way forward. His words struck a chord deep within her. And you've stayed, you've become part of this. He considered her words, the flickering flames casting shadows across his features. I didn't come to just help. Clara felt the tension within her ease slightly. It was a leap of faith, accepting that maybe she didn't have to be alone in this journey. She said. Jake's smile warmed her heart. I'd like that. We've already built something incredible together. As winter settled in, their bond deepened, slowly weaving their lives together. They learned to find joy in simplicity, building snowmen, cozy nights spent reading by the fire, and shared glances that seemed to promise unspoken futures. Clara's heart felt lighter. Each moment shared a brick laid in the foundation of their budding partnership. As spring approached, new life began to blossom all around them. They tackled small projects together, planting a garden and reinstating the beauty of their surroundings. With each bud breaking through the thawing soil, Clara felt a rush of hope, a reflection of the possibilities that lay before them. One evening, as they watched the sun dip beneath the horizon, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, Clara felt a shift within her. She ventured, her voice tentative but steady. Jake turned to her, eyes glimmering with sincerity. I know we can. We've already faced storms and rebuilt together. And in that moment, something clicked. The fear that had long haunted her began to fade as warmth blossomed in her heart. She was no longer just living in a cabin. She was part of a greater story, one filled with trust, companionship, and love. That night, as they huddled beneath the blankets, Clara felt Jake beside her, his presence a source of comfort. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift into dreams filled with laughter, the scent of fresh earth, and the promise of new beginnings. As the days grew longer and brighter, the cabin evolved alongside their connection, becoming a true reflection of their hearts. Clara found herself confidently exploring the landscape of her future, knowing Jake would be there to support her every step of the way. When summer arrived, the sun warmed their skin and the flowers bloomed around them. Clara turned to Jake, a bright smile painting her face. I never thought I could love this place as much as I do. He grinned in return, warmth radiating from his expression. That's because you built it with your strength and spirit. Through the joy of creating their lives together, Clara understood that rebuilding wasn't merely about logs and nails. It was about forging connections, weathering storms, and growing alongside someone who made her feel alive. In the heart of those mountains, surrounded by the laughter of nature and the bond they had formed, Clara felt whole again. She had not only rebuilt her cabin but had also reclaimed her sense of self, weaving a tapestry of love and resilience into the very structure that sheltered them. As she stood at the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she understood. No matter what storms came their way, they would face them together. They had built something beautiful, and that beautiful thing was more than just a cabin. It was a home woven from trust, laughter, and the courage to love. In that space, Clara cherished every heartbeat of their shared journey. She had found what she had been searching for, a quiet cowboy who had helped her rebuild her life, log by log, and in every moment, an unwavering connection that would stand the test of time. The wind howled like a wounded animal, battering against the cabin walls as Clara stood frozen at the window, heart racing. Lightning sliced through the sky, illuminating the jagged outline of the mountains that surrounded her home. It was supposed to be a cozy night in her sanctuary, but the storm had arrived with a vengeance. At that moment, Clara felt small, the weight of the world pressing down like the dark storm clouds above. Just a week ago, she had settled into her new life here, away from the noise and chaos of the city. This cabin represented freedom, solace, and a fresh start. But now it felt like everything she had fought for was about to be ripped away. The wooden beams creaked ominously as thunder rumbled in the distance. Clara's heart sank. Suddenly, a crash echoed outside, sending her heart racing. She stumbled back, panic clawing at her throat as she fought the urge to flee. That sound. It didn't just shake the cabin, it shook her very spirit. Determined not to give in to fear, Clara yanked open the door and stepped into the fury of the storm. Rain mingled with the wind, stinging her skin as she fought to see through the blinding sheets of water. The trees around her danced wildly, and the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and pine. Then, just when despair threatened to swallow her whole, she caught sight of someone moving through the wild rain. A man tall and sturdy, moving with purpose. He wasn't afraid. Clara squinted, her heart pounding as he drew nearer, his silhouette emerging through the chaos. He called out over the howling winds, his voice a steady anchor amidst the storm. Clara hesitated, surprise mingling with exhaustion. She shouted back, unsure of whether to trust this stranger. "Jake," he replied, a calmness in his demeanor that felt strangely reassuring. "I saw your cabin take a hit." As panic morphed into a strange sense of relief, Clara nodded, her pride pushed aside. "Okay," she said, her voice barely cutting through the cacophony. Jake rushed forward, pulling her into the shelter of his strength as they navigated the wreckage around her cabin. Together, they assessed the damage, the storm still raging but beginning to lose its intensity as she took solace in his steady presence. Clara felt something begin to shift within her, a flicker of hope amid the chaos. As they worked, side by side, the rain pounded on the roof, the wind howling like a banshee. Jake moved with ease, lifting fallen logs and securing torn panels with precision. Clara felt invigorated by his determination, like a flame was being rekindled in her own heart. Each log they salvaged wasn't just a piece of timber, it was a piece of her life, her dreams, her identity. Clara asked between breaths, curiosity pushing through her sudden awe of him. "I wander," he replied simply, glancing at her with eyes that held the weight of his unspoken story. "I've always found comfort in the mountains." As they continued to work, Clara felt her muscles burn and ache, but every swing of the hammer, every log lifted felt empowering. "I moved out here to escape," she confessed, wiping the sweat from her brow. Jake asked, tossing a beam onto the growing pile of salvaged wood. "Maybe from everything," Clara admitted, her voice softening. Life became overwhelming, too noisy, too fast. He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Sometimes when we escape, we leave pieces of ourselves behind." A sense of understanding passed between them, a deep connection rooted in shared struggles. The storm began to wane, the rain reducing to a soft drizzle. As they worked, Jake's presence felt grounding, a tether in the whirlwind of her emotions. Days turned into weeks, and together they began the painstaking process of rebuilding Clara's cabin log by log, nail by nail. They organized the remnants, carefully repairing the battered walls and roof, and slowly a structure began to emerge. With every plank they secured, Clara felt a surge of pride bubble within her. She was no longer simply patching a house, she was crafting a home. But as their connection deepened, Clara found herself wrestling with an unsettling fear. What would happen once the cabin was finished? Would Jake vanish like a ghost, leaving her to face the world alone again? One rainy afternoon, as they took a break and a soft mist settled over the trees, Clara mustered the courage to voice her worries. "What's next for you, Jake?" He looked thoughtful, the soft rain weaving through the air like whispered secrets. "I'll keep moving, I suppose." Disappointment creased her brow. "So you're just passing through?" A flicker of something crossed his face. "Regret, maybe." "I didn't come here to be just a temporary fix for your cabin, Clara." His voice trailed off, the words heavy in the air. Clara could feel her heart thundering in her chest. "What do you mean?" I thought. Jake met her gaze, intensity radiating from his eyes. "I want more than that." His honesty cut deep, and Clara felt the weight of it settle in her stomach. "Because sometimes we have to take risks," he replied, his tone earnest. For a moment, Clara was caught in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Did she dare let herself fall for him, knowing he was a drifter, a man of the mountains who could vanish as easily as he appeared? But in the depths of her heart, she had already begun to feel something for him, a connection that anchored her amidst the storm of her past. As the sun began to peek through the clouds, illuminating the remnants of what they had built, Clara made a decision. "Let's finish this cabin," she said, determination edging her voice. Jake nodded, a hint of relief in his expression. Days continued to pass, each filled with hard work and increasingly meaningful conversations. They shared stories of pasts filled with pain and sorrow, small moments that shaped who they were. The cabin transformed from a shambles into a sturdy shelter, a testament to resilience and friendship. But the fear of losing him loomed like looming storm clouds on the horizon, a silent predator lurking in the shadows. Clara pushed those feelings deep down, focusing on the work ahead. Together, they planted a garden outside, something to nurture as the seasons turned. The bond between them deepened, laughter echoing off the newly erected walls. Each evening they would sit together, sharing meals prepared with fresh vegetables from the garden, warmth radiating between them. Clara still felt the unease gnawing at her heart. She wanted to celebrate what they had built, but questions hung heavy in the back of her mind. One evening, as they lingered on the porch, the sky painted with oranges and purples, Clara dared to lean closer. "What if you stayed, Jake? Really stayed?" Jake looked at her, intensity radiating from his eyes. "You deserve so much, Clara. You make it sound like that's all I'm worth," she countered, her voice rising. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean it that way, it's just..." Clara exclaimed, frustration spilling over. "I've rebuilt my life just to see you leave, and I can't." Before she could finish, the rumble of thunder cut through the air. Clouds rolled in swiftly, blanketing the sky with gray. "Not again," she whispered, dread washing over her. Jake stood, determination etched across his features. "We can do this." And so they faced the fury of the storm once more, moving swiftly to secure the cabin, to protect what they had built together. Clara felt a mixture of dread and adrenaline, the need to muster all her strength. As the rain poured down, they worked side by side, the echo of thunder blending with their frantic efforts. But amid the chaos, Clara caught sight of something that sent a chill down her spine. In the distance, dark figures loomed, moving toward the cabin, shadows against the backdrop of the storm. She shouted over the wind. His eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face. Before she could reply, the figures advanced, illuminated by flashes of lightning. Clara felt a rush of anxiety flooding through her. Who were they? What were they doing here? Just then the door exploded inward, slamming against the wall. Wind and rain whipped inside, and through the doorway stumbled several rugged men, their faces grim, drenched and wild-eyed. One of them shouted, and confusion spiraled into chaos. Clara's heart raced as she stepped back, fear flooding her senses. She demanded, panic gripping her throat. Jake stepped forward, instinctively placing himself between Clara and the intruders. "You need to leave." he said sternly, his voice low and commanding. The figures hesitated, staring at the two of them. Clara could feel the tension in the air, the storm raging outside matched only by the turmoil inside. She had rebuilt her life and her home, and now it felt like it was all about to come crashing down again. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," one of the men growled, taking a step closer. Clara's breath hitched, confusion twisting into fear. "What are you talking about?" But Jake, unyielding, stood tall. And just like that, the storm swept in lightning danced outside, and whatever lay ahead would force Clara to confront not just the threat to her home, but her feelings for the man standing by her side. As tension crackled like electricity around them, she realized this was more than just a battle to protect a cabin. It was a battle for her very future. In that defining moment, the storm outside roared to life, a fierce reminder that some storms could change everything. And Clara knew all she could do now was face what lay ahead, with Jake at her side or standing alone. The choice was hers, and the battle to come would test every ounce of her newfound strength.